Welcome back, dear listener. Settle in now, get cozy beneath your blanket, dim the lights, and let your mind drift softly to another time, a time long past cloaked in shadow, mystery, and hardship. Imagine, if you can, the faint flicker of candlelight dancing gently on cold stone walls, casting elongated shadows that seem to tell stories of their own. Picture yourself waking in the stillness of early dawn, not to the aroma of fresh coffee or the hum of modern comforts, but to a biting chill seeping steadily into your bones. Outside your door, the world awaits, harsh, unforgiving, relentless. There are no refrigerators, no supermarkets brimming with endless bounty. No sleek, shiny packaging promising freshness and nutrition. Your breakfast, if you can even call it that, is little more than a tasteless gruel, a piece of bread so dense it could double as a brick in water. Or perhaps a thin sour ale barely safe to drink. Yes, my friend, tonight we journey together into the very heart of medieval Europe, where survival was measured meal by meager meal, day by unforgiving day. We'll walk through markets buzzing with flies, along muddy streets stained with filth, and into kitchens thick with smoke and desperation. We'll glimpse lavish banquets overflowing with opulence even as peasants huddle hungry in the shadows. We'll discover the hidden truth behind every stale loaf of bread and watered-down pint of ale. So close your eyes and listen closely tonight. You will see vividly the grim reality of a world where food was not simply nourishment, but a perilous gamble with life itself. Prepare yourself, because by the end of this journey you may just find yourself more grateful than ever for that humble slice of bread on your table tonight. Number 1. The brutal wake-up call. Imagine, if you can, waking not to the gentle warmth of sunlight streaming softly through your window, nor to the calming sounds of chirping birds, or the pleasant aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling your home. Instead, picture yourself stirring reluctantly from sleep to a piercing, relentless chill gnawing deep into your bones, a chill so fierce it feels almost personal. Your eyes slowly open to darkness, illuminated only by the faintest sliver of dawn struggling through the crude gaps in the weathered wooden shutters. As your vision clears, you find yourself staring at a ceiling that is not a smooth stretch of drywall, but a rough patchwork of straw and mud, cracked and crumbling from years of wear. Small spiders, almost invisible in the gloom, weave their silent webs, patiently waiting for their breakfast, indifferent to your own gnawing hunger. You shift beneath the coarse, scratchy woolen blanket that has done little to shield you from the harshness of the night. Your muscles ache with stiffness, protesting even the smallest movement. Last night's sleep was not restful, far from it. It was filled with tossing, turning, and listening to the faint rustle of rodents as they moved quietly around the corners of your home, searching for the meager crumbs that had fallen unnoticed during yesterday's sparse meal. You rise slowly, reluctantly, pulling your feet from the meager warmth offered by your thin bedding and placing them onto a dirt floor cold and damp beneath your bare skin. You flinch, instinctively recoiling, yet knowing this discomfort is nothing new, just another reminder of the daily struggles that define your existence. The air within your small dwelling is thick, heavy with the mingling odors of moldy straw, stale smoke from yesterday's weak fire, and the sharp, acrid tang of animal dung from the goats and chickens huddled in the corner, sharing your home as an uneasy necessity against the bitter elements outside. Their soft bleating and restless scratching echo quietly through the tiny room, reminders of both their presence and the vital role they play in your family's fragile survival. With a sigh that feels heavier than it should, you move toward the small hearth, black and stained and scarred from endless days of use and misuse. You kneel, arranging bits of dried straw and brittle twigs with practiced yet weary hands, attempting to coax life from yesterday's embers. A thin ribbon of smoke rises lazily into the room, stinging your eyes, making you blink away tears that are both physical and deeply emotional. But the fire does not come easily. It never does. Fuel is scarce, and you have learned long ago that fire is a luxury. Wood must be gathered, sometimes stolen at great risk from forests claimed by powerful nobles whose idea of justice often involves swift, brutal punishment. You glance briefly toward the empty woodpile, feeling the familiar sinking sensation in your stomach. Not just hunger, but anxiety, dread even. The harsh truth is that each day you face is filled with countless small battles fought and often lost against a world seemingly designed to break you. With slow, aching movements, you finally manage to coax a weak flame, barely enough to chase away the morning gloom, offering more smoke than warmth. You stand straightening your back, the bones cracking softly, your body reminding you yet again of its desperate need for nourishment. Real nourishment. Your mind drifts unwillingly toward thoughts of food, conjuring images of hearty stews, fresh bread and roasted meats. Images tantalizingly vivid yet cruelly unattainable. Reality quickly intrudes. Your eyes shift toward the rough wooden table in the center of the room, empty, save for a single crust of dark coarse bread, hard and uninviting, barely edible, saved from yesterday's meager meal. The sight brings little comfort, and yet you know that even this pathetic morsel is precious, worth every bit of gnawing discomfort it may inflict upon your teeth and gums. Outside, a faint murmur begins to rise, the village awakening slowly around you, each household facing similar struggles, similar pains. Yet this offers no solace, only a grim recognition that your misery is shared by many, compounded rather than relieved. The village you know is nothing more than a fragile cluster of lives barely holding together beneath the weight of hardship and poverty. You pause at the doorway, your fingers brushing lightly against the rough wood, the crude hinges creaking gently beneath your touch. You hesitate, wondering not for the first time how many more days you can face like this one, how much longer your body and spirit can endure such relentless, grinding hardship. And yet, despite the crushing weight of despair pressing down upon you, something deep inside stubbornly refuses to surrender. Perhaps it's survival instinct, fierce and primal, or perhaps it's simply the faint flicker of hope that tomorrow might, by some impossible miracle, be slightly better. You open the door, stepping out into a world cloaked in mist and uncertainty, your breath forming small clouds of vapor before your face mingling with the cold air. You gaze upward at a sky heavy with gray clouds, their oppressive presence seeming to mirror your own heart, your own spirit. The cold whispers around you, insistent, almost mocking, reminding you again and again of your vulnerability, your fragility. As you stand there letting the bitter wind tug at your thin garments, one haunting question drifts into your mind, a question you'll carry with you through every laborious hour ahead. How much longer can you survive this harsh medieval life, and what brutal truths still await you before the day is done? You step carefully onto the muddy path, boots worn and patched countless times, their thin soles offering minimal protection against the biting chill and rough terrain beneath your feet. Each step feels like a small battle against exhaustion, against cold, against the simple desire to turn back toward the fragile sanctuary of your home. But retreat is impossible, and you press onward, knowing every step you take brings you closer to the harsh realities that shape your world. As you move deeper into the heart of the village, you pass neighbors who share brief nods, their faces drawn and tired eyes hollow with hunger and resignation. Children bundled in tattered layers gather quietly around a small communal well, their voices subdued, too weary even for play. Elderly men and women shuffle slowly, bent under the weight of years and endless toil, their gnarled hands gripping walking sticks as if clinging to their last threads of strength. You pause briefly near the village market, which at this early hour offers only the faintest signs of life, vendors quietly arranging their sparse wares, their breath misting in the cold morning air. You glance at displays of shriveled vegetables, stale bread loaves dusted with flour to disguise their hardness, and a scattering of dried salted fish, whose smell alone is enough to turn your stomach. Prices here reflect desperation, yours, theirs, each coin spent representing not only sustenance but sacrifice, deprivation elsewhere. Continuing forward, your gaze drifts beyond the village limits toward the fields stretching endlessly toward a mist-covered horizon, their earth frozen unyielding beneath your weary feet. You know this landscape intimately, each plot of soil marked with your sweat, your struggle, your labor. It is a landscape of stark survival where life hangs perpetually on a razor-thin edge between harvest and hunger. Your day, you realize grimly, will be spent here, breaking ground that resists your every effort, planting seeds in soil that seems reluctant to bear fruit, praying to unseen gods for a bounty that rarely comes. And yet you must continue, because stopping resting or giving up would mean certain doom. Such is the brutal arithmetic of your medieval existence. As the first hours of daylight pass, your body strains with effort, muscles burning, stomach clenching painfully from emptiness. You wonder briefly how different your life would be in another time, a time of plenty of comfort, of simple human dignity. But these thoughts quickly dissolve, washed away by a reality too harsh to allow dreams of anything more than immediate survival. The sky above grows darker clouds heavy with the threat of rain, or perhaps even sleet, offering little respite, only more hardship, more discomfort. You pause, wiping sweat and grime from your brow, your gaze sweeping across the field toward your fellow villagers, men and women equally trapped, equally burdened, equally powerless in the face of relentless poverty and oppressive feudal demands. In that moment, standing exhausted beneath a sky that seems determined to crush you, another haunting thought emerges, a thought more chilling than the cold wind biting your skin. What secrets lie behind the meager meals and bitter toil you face daily? And could you truly endure the horrifying reality of medieval food that awaits you? Number 2. Bread, life or death. As the morning sun struggles to climb above the distant tree line, casting faint amber streaks across the gray horizon, you feel the deep gnawing hunger stir again inside you. It is a hunger that no fleeting distraction can truly silence, a relentless ache that persists ever-present day after grinding day. But there is one simple item that offers a glimmer of hope, a single crumb of comfort amidst the ceaseless hardships of medieval life: bread. Bread. Even the word itself seems heavy with meaning, echoing through history with a weight far greater than its humble composition of flour, water, and salt might suggest. It is sustenance, yes, but also symbolism. Life and survival compressed into a dense, heavy loaf, as precious as gold to those who can scarcely afford the luxury of daily nourishment. But what if this bread, the very thing keeping you alive, was also a hidden threat? What if the humble loaf upon your table concealed dangers that could quietly, slowly, and insidiously erode your health, stealing away your strength, your vitality, perhaps even your very life? Picture yourself for a moment standing in the crowded, dusty village square, where bakers set out their daily offerings upon crude wooden tables. There is no neatly arranged display of soft, airy loaves wrapped in clean paper. No inviting aroma of freshly baked goods wafting gently toward you. Instead, there is an air of suspicion, a subtle tension beneath the surface. You eye each loaf carefully, knowing that appearances can deceive, knowing that the innocent-looking bread you buy today might contain secrets far darker than you dare imagine. You step closer cautiously, your eyes scanning the rough, dark loaves arranged haphazardly on the baker's stand. The crust is hard, cracked, almost stone-like. Some loaves are oddly misshapen, their surfaces uneven, pocked, and scarred from poor baking practices. You reach out, lifting one in your hand, feeling its dense weight, too dense, perhaps suspiciously so. Why, you wonder, does this loaf feel heavier than it should? What could possibly lie hidden beneath its rough, browned exterior? The answer, unfortunately, is as shocking as it is cruelly practical. This loaf of bread may have been deliberately adulterated. In medieval times, flour was expensive, and bakers driven by desperation or greed often resorted to mixing cheaper, far more sinister ingredients into their dough. Imagine the flour you rely upon, the very foundation of your diet, being diluted with chalk-ground acorn sawdust, or even powdered bones. Ingredients chosen not for nutrition, but simply to stretch their limited supply and maximize profit. You break open the loaf, hearing the rough crack of the hardened crust beneath your fingers, feeling the gritty texture as tiny particles spill out, crumbling onto your palm. You rub them between your fingers, confused, disturbed. This is not the soft, wholesome crumb of freshly baked bread. It is something else entirely. Something coarse, gritty, foreign. Could you imagine tasting bread made not from pure flour, but from substances better suited to construction than consumption? Can you picture grinding your teeth through loaves mixed with chalk, an ingredient intended to whiten walls, not sustain life? Or sawdust gathered from the floors of carpenters' workshops, wood shavings designed for burning, not digestion? Yet this was the grim reality facing medieval villagers every single day. Bread, their very lifeline, was a gamble, a cruel roll of the dice, promising nourishment, but sometimes delivering sickness instead. Consuming these contaminated loaves was not merely unpleasant, it was dangerous. Sawdust and chalk offered no nutritional value, leaving villagers weakened, exhausted, and more vulnerable to illness and disease. Bone powder, disturbing as it sounds, could even lead to infections or worse. As you hold the gritty crumbs in your palms, staring at their foreign texture, you can almost hear the whispered complaints and desperate curses of villagers cheated by their own neighbors, suffering silently because the alternative, starvation, was far more terrifying. But what drove bakers to commit such acts? What desperation compelled them to risk the health of their own community? The answer lies in the harsh, unyielding economic realities of medieval life, where survival was a daily struggle and profit was measured not in luxury, but simply in the ability to endure another day. You step back from the baker's stand, the loaf still in your hand, weighing the impossible choice now facing you. Eat this bread, risking your health, your strength, your very life, or refuse it, condemning yourself and your family to certain hunger, deprivation, and perhaps starvation. What would you choose, standing there in that crowded market, your stomach clenched in painful hunger, your body aching from relentless labor? Could you afford to question the loaf placed before you? Or must you accept the brutal truth that even the simplest act of eating bread could be a gamble, a desperate wager against fate itself? And as you turn away, clutching your loaf tightly against your chest, another unsettling question begins to take hold. A question even darker, even more troubling. If the bread you rely upon every single day holds such hidden dangers, what other terrifying secrets might lie concealed within the food that sustains your fragile life? You return slowly to your humble dwelling, the adulterated loaf cradled in your arms like a precious yet dangerous burden. As you walk along the muddy path, each step feels heavier, more deliberate, weighed down not just by physical exhaustion, but by the grim realization of your own helplessness in the face of such cruel deception. At home, you place the loaf gently on the rough wooden table, staring at its uninviting surface. Your stomach growls impatiently, demanding sustenance, yet your mind hesitates, wrestling with the harsh truth you've just uncovered. Hunger is powerful. It clouds judgment, weakens resolve, and makes even the questionable seem acceptable, even desirable. You break off a small piece, feeling the harsh crust resist your fingertips. Bringing it closer, you sniff cautiously, catching an unpleasant whiff, not the warm, yeasty aroma of bread fresh from the oven, but something faintly stale, musty, almost chemical. Yet what choice do you truly have? Slowly, reluctantly, you take a cautious bite, chewing, carefully, grimacing at the gritty texture that crunches between your teeth. Each swallow feels forced, unpleasant, a reminder that survival demands sacrifice, even the sacrifice of something as simple as trust in your daily bread. But where did this trust begin, and how had it become so easily betrayed? In medieval Europe, bread was more than just a food. It was a symbol of security, stability, even community. Bakers held an essential role, their ovens the heartbeat of village life, their products central to survival. A single bad loaf could shatter trust, create conflict, and spark outrage. Yet as the demands of feudal taxes increased and the pressure of survival mounted, honesty became a luxury fewer and fewer could afford. Picture a baker named Thomas. Perhaps a man you've known your entire life, whose father and grandfather before him baked bread for your village. Imagine Thomas rising before dawn, kneading dough in a small smoke-filled bakery, his hands cracked and raw from years of toil. Each morning he faces the impossible dilemma of feeding his own family while meeting the demands of his lord, who cares little for the baker's plight, and even less for the quality of bread provided to the peasants. What choice does Thomas truly have? Driven by necessity rather than greed, he carefully mixes small handfuls of chalk or ground acorns into his dough, stretching his flour supply silently, praying no one will notice, or if they do that, they'll quietly accept it, understanding his desperate need. But what happens when suspicion becomes certainty, when the villagers inevitably discover the truth? Medieval justice could be swift, brutal, unforgiving. Bakers found guilty of adulteration were sometimes subjected to humiliating punishments, public ridicule, physical beatings, heavy fines, or worse. Yet even these harsh consequences rarely solved the deeper issues that drove them to deception, poverty, desperation, and the constant crushing pressure of survival. As you chew another gritty mouthful, swallowing the bitter reality, your mind drifts toward the wealthier citizens, the nobles and lords, whose loaves were soft, pure white, and untouched by adulteration. Their bread symbolized privilege, power, purity. To them, the very idea of eating bread laced with sawdust or chalk would have been unimaginable, inconceivable. Yet for you, this unimaginable reality is daily life, a cruel, grinding normality you cannot escape. You look down at your loaf half-eaten, feeling the tension between hunger and disgust pulling sharply within you. And in this moment, another troubling thought arises, deeper and even darker than before, echoing quietly but insistently in your mind. If bread, the simplest, most essential food of your daily existence, could hide such terrifying secrets, what other dangers lie concealed in your daily meals, waiting silently to claim your health, your strength, or even your life? Number 3. The peasant's plate. Monotony of misery. Imagine for a moment that every meal you ever ate was the same. Picture, if you can, waking each morning knowing exactly what you'll consume, not as a comfort, but as a heavy, endless burden. There is no pleasant surprise, no variety, no joyful anticipation, only the monotonous certainty of another bleak serving of unchanging fare. Welcome to the medieval peasant's daily meal, a grim reality of relentless repetition. Let your mind drift into this vivid scene. You sit down slowly at a crude wooden table scarred by countless meals past its surface, uneven beneath your roughened hands. Around you, dim candlelight flickers, weakly, barely pushing back the shadows that creep steadily inward. The air hangs heavy, thickened by smoke from a struggling hearth, mingling unpleasantly with the faintly rancid odor of stale grease that has seeped into every porous surface. In front of you lies your meal, a humble bowl filled with a thin, watery porridge. This is not the creamy, comforting oatmeal you might imagine. It is something altogether different, something starkly utilitarian, crafted not for flavor or pleasure but solely for survival. A coarse mixture of barley or rye boiled until it becomes a gluey paste dotted with lumps that stubbornly resist smoothing. It offers little sustenance, less flavor, and zero pleasure. Beside this bowl sits a hardened crust of dark bread as dense and uninviting as the stones that line your crude fireplace. You pick it up slowly, feeling its abrasive texture scratch your fingers, knowing the effort required to chew through it. The edges are burned slightly blackened in patches, a testament to the baker's weary inattentiveness or sheer indifference to quality. You tear a small piece from the loaf, straining your fingers with effort, and dip it into your porridge, hoping that the warmth might soften it. But the bread remains stubbornly resistant, absorbing the thin liquid without yielding even the slightest hint of comfort. Each bite feels like a chore, each swallow a conscious effort of willpower. Yet you eat. You must eat. Hunger is ever present, a constant companion that never fully retreats, always waiting quietly beneath the surface of every thought and action. You have no other option, no luxurious alternative waiting behind cupboard doors. There are no cupboards, no shelves lined with preserves or stores of food. There is only this bowl, this loaf, and the promise of the same tomorrow, the day after, and beyond. Now imagine this single meal repeating itself endlessly. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Though those distinctions hardly exist in your medieval world, all blending seamlessly into one prolonged experience of culinary despair. Variety is a privilege you cannot afford. Flavor a concept so distant it may as well belong to another world entirely. Occasionally, on rare days marked by luck or fortune, perhaps after harvest season, or during some small celebration, there might be a modest improvement. A handful of dried peas or beans tossed into the porridge pot, softening into something slightly more substantial. Perhaps a small sprinkling of salt or a drizzle of fat scraped carefully from the bottom of a cooking pan to lend the illusion of indulgence. But these moments are fleeting, cruelly brief glimpses of a richer existence, quickly swallowed by the relentless monotony of everyday survival. Consider, too, the toll this repetition takes not only upon your spirit but upon your body. Day after day, month after month, you consume meals deficient in nearly every essential nutrient your body craves. Vitamin deficiencies weaken your bones, dull your senses, cloud your mind. Lack of variety ensures your diet remains dangerously imbalanced, leading inevitably to illnesses whose names you do not even know. Only their symptoms: fatigue, weakened eyesight, skin lesions, loose teeth. You see these symptoms around you every day, reflected in the drawn faces of your family, neighbors, and fellow villagers. You recognize the slow deterioration, knowing it mirrors your own fate. A path all too familiar and tragically unavoidable. The cost of monotony is written plainly in the hollow eyes and gaunt cheeks of everyone you meet. Yet you persist because you must. You force each spoonful of tasteless gruel down your throat, each bite of bread into your aching jaws, understanding that the alternative is far worse. Starvation looms as an ever-present threat, lingering at the edges of every thin meal, waiting impatiently for the moment when even this meager sustenance becomes impossible. As you sit at this bleak table, forcing down another dreary mouthful, a troubling question drifts quietly into your mind, a thought more unsettling than the tasteless porridge on your tongue. Could there be hidden dangers in even this monotonous meal? Dangers lurking just beyond your understanding, waiting patiently to claim your health, your strength, or even your life. With this unsettling thought lingering uneasily in your mind, you begin to notice the deeper layers of suffering hidden within the endless repetition of your meals. It is not merely the monotony that slowly erodes your will. It is the subtle yet insidious dangers concealed within this nutritional deprivation. Imagine now a particularly harsh winter, a time when food always scarce becomes critically rare. Picture yourself carefully rationing each small handful of grain, measuring it anxiously with trembling fingers, knowing the exact limit of your resources. Each portion, smaller, thinner, less filling than the one before, each bowl emptier, offering less relief from the gnawing ache in your belly. But what happens when your limited diet, already dangerously inadequate, becomes even more restricted? Your body, already weakened by months of nutritional poverty, becomes susceptible to ailments previously unimaginable. Your teeth, lacking vital nutrients, begin to loosen your gums, bleeding softly into the porridge unnoticed at first. Bones ache persistently, joints stiffening painfully with every movement, the simplest tasks growing steadily more difficult. Your vision blurs the world around you, fading slowly into indistinct shapes and shadows, leaving you vulnerable, uncertain, frightened. Yet you remain unaware of the root cause of these symptoms, unable to understand that your monotonous diet, this endless repetition of inadequate food, is slowly, relentlessly draining your life away. Medieval understanding of nutrition is limited, practically non-existent. You see only suffering without explanation, a cruel mystery inflicted seemingly by fate alone. And it's not only physical suffering you endure. The relentless monotony seeps deeper, eroding your emotional well-being, your sense of hope, your very capacity for joy. Meals, once opportunities for family connection or quiet reflection, become dreaded events, something you face with grim resignation rather than anticipation. The daily ritual of eating transforms gradually into a symbol of oppression, a constant reminder of your lowly status, your vulnerability, your helplessness. Consider, too, the psychological burden borne by medieval parents forced to feed their children meals that never truly satisfy, watching helplessly as their offspring grow frailer, weaker, visibly wasting away before their very eyes. Imagine the quiet despair, the whispered prayers spoken nightly, begging unseen powers for some miraculous intervention, for the gift of relief from this cycle of suffering. Yet miracles rarely arrive, and the cycle continues unbroken year after relentless year. You begin to see meals not as nourishment, but as mere survival. The brutal arithmetic of life, measured spoonful by spoonful, bite by bite. Each swallow becomes an act of defiance, a small rebellion against the ever-present specter of starvation. Yet even this defiance carries no triumph, only resignation, fatigue, and slow decay. And as seasons pass, your memories of flavor variety, even the simple pleasure of food, fade quietly, disappearing into distant, inaccessible recollections. You forget what sweetness tastes like, or the delicate freshness of vegetables newly harvested from fertile earth. You lose touch with sensations that others more fortunate experience regularly, effortlessly, without thought or gratitude. Your meals become defined not by what they are, but by what they lack. Taste, variety, pleasure, vitality. Each serving reinforces the profound injustice woven into your existence, the brutal reality that food essential, basic, fundamental is denied to you in its most nourishing forms. Yet even in this despairing state, you remain alive, surviving against impossible odds. You swallow each miserable mouthful, not because it offers true nourishment, but simply because the alternative, starvation, is too terrifying to consider. And so day after endless day, meal after identical meal, you persist trapped within the relentless monotony of medieval poverty, caught in a cycle of misery from which escape feels impossible. As your spoon scrapes quietly against the empty bowl, another troubling question drifts into your consciousness, a question that haunts you, whispering quietly, persistently, demanding your attention. If monotony alone can inflict such profound suffering, what greater dangers still await you hidden within foods yet to be explored? Foods that promise survival, but may deliver something far more sinister. Number 4, meet the rare luxury. In your daily existence, amid the relentless monotony of porridge and stale bread, there exists a faint, tantalizing dream, a fantasy so distant it seems almost impossible. It is the dream of meat, succulent, savory, rich, and satisfying, capable of quelling the deep hunger gnawing endlessly inside you. But for a medieval peasant like yourself, meat is not merely rare, it is nearly mythical, a fleeting luxury reserved for the luckiest, the wealthiest, or the most desperate. Imagine now a special occasion, a rare celebration that grants you a glimpse of culinary heaven. Perhaps it's a holy day, or the birth of a child, or the successful conclusion of harvest. Whatever the cause, it offers an opportunity to taste a delicacy you've dreamed of for months, perhaps even years. Your entire community gathers, anticipation crackling in the air like an electric current, eyes bright with eager hope, and mouths already watering at the very thought. In the center of this joyous gathering lies a humble table, scarred, splintered, worn smooth by generations. Upon it rests a single precious platter holding the evening's treasure, a modest cut of meat. Perhaps it's a small stringy chicken, or a scrap of pork tough salted, smoked beyond recognition. But for you, it is ambrosia, a gift from heaven itself, a feast richer and more satisfying than anything you've tasted in months. The aroma alone nearly overwhelms you. Smoky, salty, vaguely spiced, drifting seductively through the crowded room, swirling about your senses, igniting your imagination. Your mouth waters, stomach rumbling urgently, limbs trembling with barely restrained anticipation. This moment, brief as it will inevitably be, represents more than mere food. It symbolizes dignity, comfort, joy, the briefest escape from daily misery. But why, you ask yourself quietly, is meat such an agonizingly rare pleasure? Why must something so simple, so fundamentally nourishing, be forever beyond your reach? The harsh truth lies within the strict social and economic order of your medieval world. Animals, especially those suitable for consumption, are expensive. They demand resources: food, shelter, care, protection. All commodities you possess in scant quantity. Livestock represent wealth, stability, status. Luxuries unaffordable by a humble peasant struggling daily just to survive. Your small village might own a few animals collectively, carefully guarded and managed. Perhaps a pig prized above all others, fattened carefully on kitchen scraps and guarded fiercely from predators and thieves alike. Chickens perhaps scratching restlessly in the dirt, pecking hungrily at insects, laying precious eggs that serve as vital sustenance. A goat or sheep providing milk, wool, warmth, essential commodities far too valuable to sacrifice lightly. These animals are not mere food sources. They are lifelines critical to your community's very survival. Slaughtering one is not a casual decision, but an act undertaken with profound reluctance, carefully considered and debated. To lose an animal, even deliberately, is to lose stability, security, and the fragile assurance of future sustenance. Yet today, as you sit surrounded by neighbors and family, you witness such a rare sacrifice. Your eyes follow every movement as a village elder carves carefully into the precious meat, slicing thin, cautious portions, ensuring everyone present receives at least a tiny morsel. You accept your small portion gratefully, reverently, the meat barely filling your palm. Its texture feels alien beneath your fingertips, soft, fatty, richly marbled compared to your usual diet of grainy porridge. Slowly, cautiously, you lift the morsel to your lips, savoring the fragrance that envelops your senses, intoxicating in its rare perfection. As the first bite touches your tongue, your eyes close involuntarily, overwhelmed by sensations nearly forgotten. You taste salt, smoke, grease, hints of herbs, flavors subtle yet profound, vibrant reminders of what food could be if only life allowed such indulgences regularly. You chew slowly, savoring each molecule, each second of pure culinary bliss. But this moment is fleeting, tragically brief. Soon your portion is consumed, leaving behind only a poignant longing. Your stomach, teased by the promise of satisfaction, aches now, even more sharply aware of the cruel brevity of the experience. This precious moment, far from satiating your hunger, has only deepened it, intensifying the realization of all you lack. As the communal meal concludes, quiet murmurs drift softly among the villagers, conversations tinged with gratitude and sadness alike. You sense clearly that everyone present shares your bittersweet experience, the joy of tasting meat overshadowed by its painful scarcity. Meat, once commonplace in stories passed down from ancestors who lived before hardship tightened its grip, is now reduced to rare glimpses, tantalizing tastes, elusive dreams forever out of reach. Yet you linger at the table, unwilling to abandon this small, precious moment, your thoughts drifting toward troubling questions that refuse to leave your mind. Why, you wonder bitterly, must something so nourishing remain forever out of reach? Why does your society, your world, allow such stark disparity, granting wealthier citizens feasts, while you endure endless deprivation? And as these unsettling questions swirl silently within your consciousness, another darker, more chilling thought emerges quietly, insisting upon your attention. If meat, this rare and fleeting luxury, holds such profound allure, could it also conceal unseen dangers lurking quietly beneath its rich, seductive surface? With the taste of your fleeting feast lingering tantalizingly on your tongue, you begin to contemplate the hidden complexities concealed within this rare luxury. Meat in your medieval world is not merely scarce. It is perilous, filled with risks often invisible until it's tragically too late. Consider for a moment the precariousness of preserving meat without refrigeration, without modern sanitation, without the faintest knowledge of bacteria or spoilage. The meat you consumed, delicious though it was likely preserved through primitive methods: salting, smoking, drying, all techniques fraught with potential hazards. Imagine villagers carefully rubbing coarse salt into meat, layering it densely in barrels, trusting blindly in this crude preservation method. But salt in medieval Europe is costly, scarce, often adulterated itself with sand or dirt, reducing its effectiveness. Preservation, thus compromised, becomes dangerously unreliable. Or picture meat hanging inside smoky cottages, suspended from soot-blackened rafters, slowly curing amid acrid, choking fumes from peat fires. Though smoking inhibits spoilage, it is no guarantee of safety. Meat inadequately smoked or stored improperly invites mold, parasites, and hidden rot, unseen threats lurking silently, ready to claim your health, perhaps even your life. You recall vividly stories whispered fearfully among villagers, tales of neighbors stricken mysteriously after rare indulgences. Stomachs churning violently, fever spreading swiftly, families reduced overnight to helpless suffering, their only crime consuming meat inadequately preserved. Yet despite knowing these dangers, you, like everyone around you, cling desperately to dreams of meat, willingly accepting risk for fleeting moments of pleasure, comfort, dignity. Such is the cruel irony of medieval poverty. The most desired luxury becomes simultaneously the most hazardous gamble. Beyond preservation, another danger looms: poaching. The forests surrounding your village are filled with wild game, deer, boar, rabbits, animals plentiful yet cruelly forbidden. These woods belong to the noble lord, their bounty reserved exclusively for his table, his feasts, his pleasure. Yet hunger is relentless, indifferent to rules or boundaries. Desperation drives villagers, perhaps even yourself, toward forbidden hunting grounds, quietly stalking prey beneath moonlit skies, hearts pounding fearfully, knowing capture means swift, brutal punishment. Poaching meat offers temporary relief, yes, but carries unimaginable risk. Imprisonment, severe physical punishments, perhaps even death inflicted casually by lords who view peasants as expendable. You imagine a fellow villager, perhaps named William, creeping silently through dense undergrowth, bow trembling slightly in nervous hands, eyes darting anxiously for signs of patrolling guards. William risks everything: freedom, safety, life itself, for a chance to feed his family fresh meat, a fleeting moment of nourishment amid unending deprivation. And yet, if successful, what guarantee exists that William's stolen meat is safe? Wild animals carry diseases invisible to medieval eyes. Parasites, infections, unseen dangers, transferred unknowingly through inadequately cooked flesh. Even successfully acquired meat represents another gamble, another potential tragedy, lurking silently within the illusion of plenty. As you ponder these hidden perils, your stomach still grumbling from your brief indulgence, you begin to understand the cruel paradox at meat's heart. Desired above all else, meat symbolizes both aspiration and danger, nourishment and illness, relief and punishment intertwined within its elusive nature. Slowly, reluctantly, you rise from the table, stepping quietly back into your humble, monotonous life, the taste of meat fading gradually into memory. Yet your thoughts remain troubled, haunted by unsettling realizations revealed tonight. And as you retreat towards sleep, one final troubling question whispers persistently within your mind, a question demanding your attention, compelling you onward toward deeper, darker truths. If meat, this rare luxury, holds such peril beneath its surface, what deeper secrets might lie hidden within other foods, waiting patiently to claim your health, your strength, perhaps even your life? Number 5. Preserving food for survival. Picture a winter landscape, bitterly cold, shrouded in unyielding gray clouds, the world around you blanketed beneath layers of ice and snow. Fields that once promised bounty are now barren their life, hidden deep beneath the frozen ground. Animals huddle quietly in shelters, their breath forming ghostly plumes of vapor in the frigid air. In this harsh, unforgiving environment, survival hinges not merely on finding food, but on preserving it, holding desperately onto each precious scrap until spring finally relents and the earth awakens again. For a medieval villager like yourself, food preservation isn't merely a skill. It's an art, a necessity, an urgent dance performed tirelessly against the threat of starvation. Without modern comforts, no refrigerators, no airtight packaging, preserving food means relying entirely on age-old methods, born from desperation, ingenuity, and trial and error. Your survival, your family's survival, your community's survival all depend upon your ability to master this delicate balancing act. Imagine now stepping carefully into a dimly lit cellar, the air within cool and damp, thick with the pungent aroma of earth mold and fermenting vegetables. Your eyes slowly adjust to the darkness, revealing wooden shelves lined meticulously with jars and barrels, their contents carefully preserved. Each vessel a lifeline, a silent promise of nourishment amid winter's merciless grasp. You reach out, fingers brushing gently across jars filled with pickled cucumbers and onions suspended in briny vinegar, their colors faded but their crispness and nutrition locked carefully within. Nearby sits a barrel of cabbage shredded finely, fermenting quietly into sauerkraut, its sour tang waiting patiently to supplement meager winter meals. Fermentation. This ancient practice transforms ordinary produce into something altogether different, preserved. Yes, but also transformed into new flavors, textures, possibilities. Through the magic of salt, patience, and time, food that would otherwise rot quietly in forgotten corners instead becomes precious nourishment, life-saving sustenance, capable of seeing you safely through winter's darkest months. But how exactly does this transformation occur? You scarcely understand the process. You simply trust the method passed carefully down through generations. Your ancestors learned, perhaps through tragedy or fortunate accident, that salted vegetables tightly packed into barrels gradually changed into something edible, even nutritious. They discovered that bitter, almost inedible cabbage could become tangy sauerkraut, offering vitamin-rich sustenance when fresh vegetables vanished beneath snow and ice. Yet despite generations of trust, preservation carries inherent risks. Imagine opening one of these barrels or jars months after sealing it, anxiously inspecting the contents. A thin layer of mold appears, sometimes discoloration creeping along edges, a suspicious odor drifting upward. Is it safe edible? Or has spoilage claimed another precious resource, leaving you vulnerable once more to hunger's relentless advance? You taste cautiously, anxiously monitoring your body's response. If fortunate, you taste tangy freshness, savoring relief in knowing the contents are safe. But occasionally disaster strikes, batches spoiled, precious vegetables ruined by unseen contamination. Such moments are crushing defeats, stark reminders of preservation's fragile gamble, the constant uncertainty underlying every carefully preserved morsel. Now picture meat preservation, an even more complex, perilous task. Imagine carefully rubbing handfuls of coarse salt deep into freshly butchered meat, your hands cracked raw, burning from prolonged exposure. You layer meat meticulously in barrels, trusting salt's power to inhibit rot and decay, desperately hoping to extend meat's fleeting freshness through long, hungry months ahead. Yet your medieval salt is coarse, impure, adulterated with sand or dirt, expensive yet imperfect. Will it preserve meat adequately, protecting you from invisible pathogens lurking within spoiled flesh? Or will its impurities compromise the entire batch, silently inviting decay and disease? You recall bitterly occasions when preserved meat spoiled barrels opened after months to reveal putrid odors, rotting flesh, foul decay. You watched helplessly as precious resources were discarded, knowing every spoiled morsel brought hunger closer, leaving fewer defenses against winter's merciless grip. But preservation extends beyond mere barrels and salt. Smoking offers another critical technique. Imagine hanging strips of meat above fires, dense smoke curling steadily upward, infusing flesh deeply with protective chemicals and powerful flavors. Smoking transforms meat, darkening, drying, and preserving, yet it requires careful attention. Too little smoke leaves meat vulnerable. Too much smoke makes it inedible, bitter, toxic. Picture yourself standing in smoky darkness, eyes watering, lungs aching, tending fires meticulously, knowing your community's survival depends upon your vigilance. Each batch smoked successfully is victory. Each failure, catastrophic, tragic loss, rippling painfully through your village, diminishing winter's chances of survival. Drying provides yet another preservation method. Fruits like apples, pears, or berries, thinly sliced, arranged carefully upon racks, drying slowly beneath sunlight's patient gaze. You recall vividly warm autumn afternoons, spreading fruit gently across wooden trays. Children playing quietly nearby, their laughter softened by awareness of winter's imminent arrival. Now standing in your cellar, fingers brushing gently against jars, barrels, dried fruits, you sense deeply preservation's profound importance. Food preservation is hope made tangible, a stubborn defiance against winter's brutal realities, a silent promise that life will persist, even amid nature's harshest trials. Yet you understand intimately preservation's inherent uncertainty, recognizing hidden risks, concealed within each jar, barrel, rack, dangers quietly waiting, invisible pathogens silently thriving, ready to steal your nourishment, your strength, perhaps even your life. As you step back into winter's harsh daylight, cellar doors closing softly behind troubling questions whisper persistently in your mind. If preservation holds such fragile uncertainty, how certain is your survival? Can you truly trust these methods passed down through generations? Or could they conceal deeper, darker secrets quietly threatening your very existence? With these unsettling questions haunting your thoughts, you consider deeper layers of complexity concealed within medieval preservation methods. Each preserved jar or barrel symbolizes not only hope, nourishment, survival, but also profound uncertainty, hidden danger, silent threats quietly biding their time. Imagine now a late winter morning, weeks after carefully sealing preserved food. Your family gathers anxiously, resources dwindling, dangerously low stomachs, hollow eyes, hollowed further by relentless hunger. You open preservation jars cautiously, anxiety gripping your heart. Will these contents provide nourishment or disaster? Imagine biting carefully into preserved vegetables, feeling gritty textures against your tongue, tasting bitterness you cannot explain. Spoilage, contamination, unseen mold or bacteria quietly multiplying within sealed vessels, silently transforming sustenance into poison. Your community has learned painfully through devastating illness and tragic death that preserved food carries hidden risks. Botulism molds parasites invisible to medieval understanding. Without knowledge of germs, hygiene, sanitation, preservation is a gamble with survival itself. Yet despite these profound uncertainties, preservation remains essential, indispensable, your only hope against winter's harshest months. Each jar opened safely represents survival extended another day. Each batch ruined plunges your community closer towards starvation's merciless grasp. Picture vividly stories whispered fearfully through your village, families devastated after eating contaminated preserves. Bodies racked violently with illness. Loved ones lost overnight to invisible enemies, concealed silently within preserved food. Such tragedies haunt your community's memory, reminders of preservation's cruel uncertainty. Risks inevitably hidden beneath each carefully sealed vessel. You recall vividly neighbors anxiously inspecting preservation jars, discarding suspicious contents, reluctantly knowing each discarded morsel brings hunger closer, yet unable to risk devastating illness. Preservation thus requires brutal decisions, painful sacrifices, resources discarded. At slightest suspicion, survival balanced precariously between starvation and poisoning. Now imagine yourself personally responsible for these preservation tasks, burdened profoundly by your community's survival. You recall autumn days spent meticulously layering vegetables, rubbing salt, tending smoky fires, labor undertaken anxiously, never certain of outcome, always fearful of hidden spoilage, silent contamination. You understand deeply preservation's psychological burden, emotional weight borne silently yet powerfully. Every preserved batch represents hope intermingled with dread, relief mingled with anxiety, survival balanced precariously between nourishment and disaster. Yet your community perseveres stubbornly, despite preservation's inherent uncertainty. Generations of survival depend upon these methods passed carefully downward, trusting preservation, despite occasional tragedies, recognizing risks, yet unable to abandon essential techniques. Standing now amid winter's stark landscape, cellar doors closed firmly behind your thoughts, remain troubled by preservation's silent uncertainties. You understand profoundly that preserved food symbolizes survival, interwoven intimately with risk nourishment, inseparable from unseen dangers quietly lurking within every jar barrel rack. And as your stomach growls persistently, another troubling question whispers quietly within your consciousness, compelling you onward toward deeper, darker truths. If preservation methods so crucial to your survival conceal hidden risks, what greater, deeper dangers still await within your food, lurking silently, patiently waiting to claim your health, your strength, perhaps even your life? Number 6. Ale savior or saboteur. Imagine yourself stepping slowly into the dimly lit warmth of a medieval tavern, the wooden door creaking softly shut behind you. Outside, the world is harsh and unforgiving, fields, barren work, relentless hunger, a constant companion. But here inside this small, humble sanctuary exists the promise of brief respite, a rare moment of warmth and solace that comes wrapped in the simple comfort of a mug filled with ale. You breathe in deeply, absorbing the scent that permeates the air. A unique blend of yeast and barley smoke and sweat mingling together in a fragrance strangely comforting. Your gaze drifts through the candlelit room, lingering upon the villagers gathered around rough tables, their weary faces momentarily softened by the amber glow of flickering light, and the equally golden ale they cradle gently in calloused hands. Ale for medieval peasants is more than merely a drink. It is lifeline, comfort, necessity, a staple more critical than bread, more reliable than water. Yet this essential beverage carries complexities beneath its frothy surface, hidden dualities, intertwining nourishment and peril, safety and sabotage. Tonight, as you take your seat among neighbors lifting your own wooden tankard filled with ale, you silently question, is this drink truly your savior, or could it conceal a darker truth? The answer lies perhaps in the reality of water itself. Water, abundant yet cruelly unreliable, can harbor unseen threats. Rivers and wells polluted by animal waste or refuse often carry sickness invisible to the naked eye, devastating entire villages. You recall vividly childhood stories whispered fearfully by elders, entire families stricken overnight by mysterious illness, their only mistake drinking from tainted sources. In contrast, ale fermented through yeast and barley boiled, carefully stored meticulously, offered medieval communities a safer alternative. Through fermentation and brewing, harmful pathogens within water were neutralized, rendering ale one of your only reliable sources of safe hydration. Ale thus became not merely a pleasurable indulgence but a critical staple, a protective shield guarding villagers from invisible illnesses lurking silently within untreated water. Imagine now carefully raising your tankard to your lips, tasting that first sip. The liquid flows coolly across your tongue, bringing immediate relief from relentless thirst fatigue momentarily retreating. Its flavor is earthy, slightly bitter, yet comforting, a reassuring taste, familiar from childhood, connected intimately to countless memories of community gatherings, celebrations, shared stories around evening fires. Yet ale offers more than mere safety. It provides nourishment, sustenance, calories desperately needed amid medieval poverty. Consider your daily life: endless labor, inadequate food, relentless hunger, slowly eroding your strength. Ale, thick and nourishing, contains nutrients, sugars, calories desperately needed to sustain your exhausted body. For medieval peasants, ale represented not merely hydration, but vital nourishment, a necessary supplement filling nutritional gaps left by sparse, monotonous diets. Picture vividly brewers within your village, women primarily known affectionately as alewives, laboring tirelessly overseeing carefully tended fires and bubbling cauldrons. Ale brewing is meticulous work demanding attention, patience, careful balance. Barley is ground malted, boiled into wort yeast. Added carefully, fermentation watched vigilantly. Successful ale represents profound skill, communal pride, essential survival. Yet within ale's comforting embrace exists subtle complexity, hidden threats quietly waiting beneath its comforting surface. Imagine the temptation confronting alewives faced daily with desperate poverty, soaring grain prices, relentless taxation by local lords. Survival demands difficult choices. Corners cut ale, sometimes diluted secretly with water, weakened dangerously, yet sold deceptively as nourishing. Consider now your tankard's contents. Is your ale truly nourishing, safe, protective? Or has it been secretly diluted, weakened, robbed, silently of critical nutrients and protective benefits? Could your community's trusted alewife, driven by desperation rather than malice, have sabotaged your ale, transforming it silently from savior into something subtly harmful? Ale's hidden duality thus becomes tragically clear: a beverage simultaneously protective and potentially dangerous, essential yet easily compromised, nourishing yet temptingly profitable. Within every comforting sip exists quiet uncertainty, subtle questions difficult to ignore. Imagine now villagers whispering quietly, exchanging suspicious glances, tasting ale cautiously, evaluating silently whether their alewife remains trustworthy or has succumbed secretly to temptation. Trust becomes fragile suspicion. Contagious ale transforms silently from comforting lifeline into silent saboteur, quietly eroding community bonds. Yet despite these hidden complexities, ale remains essential. Medieval peasants unable to abandon its protective benefits, nutritional value, comforting reassurance. Every sip represents profound reliance balanced precariously against silent uncertainties. Villagers accept ale's quiet gamble, understanding risks, yet unable to reject essential nourishment and safety offered silently within each tankard. Slowly, thoughtfully, you set your tankard gently upon roughened wood, contemplating quietly ale's profound dualities revealed tonight. You understand intimately ale's complex nature, nourishment intertwined inextricably with uncertainty, comfort interwoven silently with suspicion. Every sip represents quiet risk accepted silently by medieval communities, unable to abandon essential nourishment despite hidden dangers quietly lurking beneath comforting surfaces. And as you rise slowly from your seat, stepping carefully into twilight's deepening shadows, another troubling question whispers persistently within your consciousness. If ale, your trusted savior, conceals hidden sabotage, could other seemingly safe staples similarly hide deeper, darker dangers, waiting silently, patiently to claim your health, your strength, perhaps even your life? With this troubling thought lingering uneasily within your mind, you begin considering deeper layers of hidden complexities concealed silently within medieval ale. Ale, comforting and protective, conceals subtle sabotage often invisible to medieval communities trusting blindly its nourishing embrace. Imagine vividly a particular harvest season, grain scarce, prices soaring, resources dangerously limited. Your community gathers anxiously, alewife forced into painful choices driven purely by survival desperation rather than malice. Barley supplies, inadequate alewives secretly dilute wort with extra water, weakening ale silently yet selling deceptively as protective nourishment. Your villagers unknowingly consume weakened ale calories, reduced subtly yet critically, nutrients quietly compromised. Bodies weaken gradually, subtly, fatigue increasing slowly yet steadily, immune systems quietly compromised. Villagers remain unaware their trusted ale protective comforting staple silently sabotages health, eroding strength subtly yet persistently beneath comforting illusion of safety. Imagine vividly one villager named Margaret Mother struggling daily to sustain family amid relentless poverty. Margaret, unaware her ale weakened dangerously, relies blindly upon its supposed nourishment, unknowingly compromising health strength, resilience through subtle caloric deprivation, concealed silently within diluted ale. Margaret's family gradually weakens susceptibility, increasing silently toward illness, infection, disease, quietly waiting within medieval realities. Your community thus confronts hidden sabotage, silently concealed within trusted staples ale, transformed quietly from protective lifeline into subtle threat, undermining health and survival. Alewives themselves, trapped by desperation rather than malice, quietly erode community bonds through subtle deception forced silently upon them by medieval realities, poverty, taxation, scarcity. Yet medieval villagers possess limited understanding of nutrition, disease, hygiene, unable fully recognizing subtle sabotage concealed silently within weakened ale. Villagers accept blindly diluted ale, unaware its silent betrayal, believing still its protective, nourishing nature, despite subtle yet profound compromises. You consider deeply how medieval ignorance conceals silently hidden sabotage communities, trusting staples blindly unaware, hidden dangers, quietly undermining health, survival, resilience. Ale represents vividly this subtle duality, protective savior silently transforming into hidden saboteur beneath medieval ignorance, poverty, desperation. Standing now beneath evening's deepening shadows, you contemplate quietly ale's troubling complexities. Revealed tonight, nourishment silently intertwined with sabotage, trust quietly undermined by subtle desperation, ignorance concealing silently hidden threats beneath comforting illusion of safety. Yet medieval communities persist stubbornly despite subtle sabotage, silently eroding health resilience. Villagers accept ale's hidden gamble, silently understanding implicitly essential nourishment outweighs quiet risks inevitably concealed within comforting surfaces. And as twilight fades slowly into darkness, your thoughts remain haunted persistently by troubling questions emerging inevitably tonight. If ale, trusted medieval savior, conceals subtle sabotage, silently undermining health, resilience, survival, what deeper, darker threats await silently within other trusted staples consumed blindly amid medieval ignorance, poverty, desperation? Number 7. Unsanitary living, when every bite could kill. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself waking up in a one-room cottage, barely more than a shack. The ceiling sags with age. The walls are mud and wattle streaked with soot and moisture. The air is damp, earthy with the sour tang of sweat and smoke and something else you try to ignore. There is no privacy here. Your entire family, 4, maybe 5 or 6 people, sleeps on piles of straw in the same space. The floor is dirt, and not metaphorically. It's actual dirt, and you can smell it. It clings to everything, your skin, your breath, your food. Rats scurry in the corners at night. Sometimes in the walls, sometimes under your blanket, sometimes beside you. Outside the window, if you even have one, lies the village lane, a path of hardened mud and waste that meanders between homes like a festering wound. There are no proper sewers, no underground pipes, no toilets. Waste is poured into the street, human, animal, kitchen scraps, rotting vegetables, decaying flesh, and worse. It's called a midden, and it's right outside your door. The smell is ever present, not just strong but alive. It rises with the morning sun, fills your nose as you walk, coats your tongue with every breath. And yet this is normal. This is life. You've never known anything else. Now, imagine preparing breakfast in this world. You kneel beside the hearth. Ash and soot from last night's fire still cling to the stones. A cracked pot rests above the embers. You reach for yesterday's bread, hard as a brick, crusted with flour and something darker. You don't look too closely. You know better. If you inspect it, you might not eat. And you must eat. You dip the bread in water, stale water drawn from a barrel outside. It's been sitting uncovered for days. Bugs dance on the surface. You skim them off. The bread softens slightly. You chew carefully, watching a fly land on your knee. You don't swat it. You're too tired. A child coughs behind you. Your youngest brother. It's that wet kind of cough. The kind that never really goes away. His face is pale. His breath rasps. You don't know what's wrong. No one does. You hope it's just the smoke. You hand him a piece of the bread and force a smile. He smiles back. You try not to think about the rat you saw nibbling that loaf last night, but you remember, you always remember. In the Middle Ages, the concept of clean is relative. Bathing is rare, weekly maybe, monthly often. For peasants, water is heavy and hard to warm. Soap is expensive or non-existent. Washing clothing is even rarer. You wear what you have until it falls apart, and then you patch it, or wear less. Your hands are always dirty, your nails are black. You cook clean harvest butcher all with the same bare fingers. No gloves, no sanitation, no disinfectant. Germs, you've never heard the word. The idea of invisible enemies living on surfaces in your food and your body, that's fantasy. That's witchcraft. So you keep eating, and sometimes you get lucky. But sometimes you don't. Your stomach cramps hours later. Maybe it's the bread. Maybe it's the turnip from last night. Maybe it's the water. You'll never know. The pain grows. You sweat. You vomit. You pray. Someone brings herbs. Someone offers honey in a cloth. Someone whispers the Lord's Prayer. And sometimes you survive, but other times your name becomes a whisper, a memory, buried in a field behind the church, unmarked, because no one can afford a gravestone. Now consider this food in this world is not sterile. It's not wrapped in plastic. It's not processed, labeled, inspected. It's exposed, vulnerable. Every step from the market stall to the hearth is a journey through filth. And every bite, a gamble. You see a wheel of cheese sitting in the market. It looks wholesome. Pale yellow, firm. But look closer. Flies rest along its edge. A streak of green mold spreads along the bottom. A rat nibbled it yesterday. You saw it. So did the vendor. He still sells it. Because what else can he do? Food is too precious to waste. No one has the luxury to discard what might still be edible. Hunger makes everything negotiable. Even danger. Especially danger. A piece of salted pork hangs from the rafter. It's cured, preserved, but you don't know how long, or where it came from. It's dusty, cracked. Something black clings to the edge. You carve around it. You hope the inside is still good. You try not to think about the flies. In summer, food spoils quickly. There are no ice boxes, no coolers. Meat goes bad, milk turns, butter softens, and insects everywhere lay eggs in anything warm, damp, and still. You don't see the larvae, but they're there. And sometimes you eat them, because what choice do you have? This is your life. This is food, and it is not safe. Not truly. Not ever. The line between nourishment and poison is paper thin in the medieval world. You are always one bite away from sickness, one sip away from infection, one meal away from misery. And yet you eat, you must, you pray, you endure. You survive, or try to, but not everyone does. In your village there's a woman named Agnes. She makes pottage thick stew with beans and barley onions and scraps of root vegetables. You've eaten her stew before. It's warm, filling, comforting. Last week she served it to 6 villagers. 3 fell ill. 2 died. They say it was the barley spoiled from the summer rain. Moldy grain. Invisible to the eye, deadly to the gut. Agnes didn't know. How could she? She wept when she heard, and then she served the same stew the next day. Because she had to. She had no other food. And so the stew continued. And people kept eating. Because hunger doesn't wait. Hunger doesn't care. And sanitation. Sanitation is a word for a different world. The danger doesn't end at the market or the hearth. It follows you everywhere. Even when you think you're safe, especially then. Let's return to your cottage. Imagine the evening meal. A small pot of stew bubbles over the fire. It's thin, more water than substance, but it's hot. You stir it with a wooden spoon worn smooth by years of use. The spoon has never been washed with soap. Only rinsed, dried, used again. A few turnips float inside, some wilted greens, a sliver of meat. You scraped it from the bone of yesterday's dinner. You think it's still good. It smells mostly fine. The pot hisses softly. The fire crackles. A child coughs behind you. You ignore the gnawing thought in the back of your mind. When did you last clean this pot properly? You don't remember. You pour the stew into bowls. They're wooden too, cracked and stained. You wipe them with a rag, one you also use to mop the floor. It's dark now. The only light comes from the fire and a single candle flickering in a corner. Shadows dance across the walls. The scent of stew mingles with the stink of unwashed bodies, the damp straw, the ever-present rot. You sit, you eat, and for a moment, just a moment, it feels almost peaceful. But then you remember. 2 doors down, a child died last week. Fever, vomiting, a stomach twisted in pain. No one knows what caused it. The priest said it was a punishment. The healer blamed the mushrooms. The mother just wept. They buried the child in a shallow grave too close to the well. And now, every sip you take from that well tastes like worry. No one speaks of it, but everyone knows. Even the dogs avoid the water. Still, what choice do you have? Clean water is a dream, a myth, a luxury for monasteries and the wealthy. For the rest of you, water is always a risk. It flows beside filth. It carries disease. It hides death. So you drink ale, or you boil it, or you close your eyes and pray. The most dangerous thing about this world isn't what you see. It's what you can't. Invisible threats lurk on every surface. Bacteria, parasites, spores, toxins. Words you've never heard. Enemies you'll never see. But they're there, in the stew, in the bread, in your hands, in your stomach. And when they strike hard. A stomach ache turns into a fever into a seizure into silence. And there's nothing you can do. No hospital, no antibiotics, no help, only herbs, hope, and holy water. And still you eat, you must. Because hunger is the greater fear. Hunger drives you to risk, to ignore the green fuzz on the cheese, to scrape the black spots off the apple, to sip from the bucket even if something just floated in. You tell yourself it's fine. You tell yourself it's always been this way, and it has, but that doesn't make it safe. You see it on the faces of your neighbors. Gaunt, pale, tired, their eyes yellowed, their bellies swollen, not from fullness, but from infection. You see it in the limp of the blacksmith, the rash on the milkmaid, the blood in your own stool. But you don't speak of it. What would be the point? Complaining doesn't clean the water, or fix the bread, or stop the coughing. So you go on, one bite at a time, one breath at a time, and you wonder, how many of your meals have shortened your life? How many bites brought you closer to the grave? Not with poison, but with filth. A slow creeping rot that begins in the gut and ends in the ground. And the worst part, you'll never know. You'll never know which bite did it. You'll never know when your luck ran out. You'll just get weaker and colder. And then you'll stop, and the world will go on, and someone else will stir the stew in the same pot, with the same spoon, in the same dirt-floored house, and the cycle continues. Because this isn't just a moment in time, it's a way of life. And in this life, food is not a gift. It's a gamble. You don't feast. You survive. You don't indulge. You endure. And as the fire dies low and the shadows grow longer, and your belly rumbles once more, you curl into the straw and wonder. If every bite carries the possibility of death, what then is the true cost of life? Number 8. Church influence. Fasting for faith or famine. Close your eyes. Imagine a world where the tolling of church bells marks every rhythm of life. Dawn breaks and the bells echo across the fields, calling villagers to their morning prayers. These same bells will ring again at noon at vespers, and finally at evening prayer, each chime an inescapable reminder of the church's presence, its authority, and its unyielding expectations. From the moment you could toddle on wobbling legs, you learned to be a medieval Christian means to live by the church's calendar. Every day is punctuated by devotional words, every season shaped by sacred observances. Every aspect of existence, even something as basic as eating, governed by ecclesiastical decree. Yet for you, a humble peasant, these decrees come at a cost far greater than you can truly afford. Imagine the harsh midwinter light barely cresting the horizon, snow still thick upon the frozen ground. You trudge from your dirt-floored cottage to the small stone church at the edge of the village. Frozen breath curls in the air as you step across the threshold, the chill chased away only by the faint incense lingering from last night's vigil. Within, candles flicker softly, casting gentle halos on the rough-hewn pews and the simple wooden altar. Father Martin stands before you, robes dark and heavy against the cold, speaking with a voice that seems to resonate within your very bones. His words drift over you like a solemn promise. Children of God, the season of Lent has arrived. For 40 days we must fast. We shall abstain from meat. We shall limit our meals. We must purify our hearts and bodies, offering sacrifice to the Lord that he may remember us in his mercy. These words are spoken with solemn conviction. Yet as they settle in your mind, they bring not peace but a cold dread. 40 days. No meat. Only simple pottage, thin as the icy wind outside, and coarse bread. Even worse, during Lent, there are additional days of fasting, Wednesdays and Fridays. Twice a week you must go without any meat, sometimes without dairy or eggs. Do you dare speak of your hunger? The parishioners around you nod solemnly, faces pale and drawn. Some bow their heads, some cross themselves. All share the same fear, the fear of falling ill, growing weak, perhaps even dying because their bodies lack the nourishment to sustain them. And yet to refuse to fast is unthinkable. The spiritual weight of disobedience looms larger than famine itself. You have been raised to believe that God's favor hinges upon your willingness to suffer for every pang of hunger you endure. You are told you draw closer to His mercy, closer to His light. To break the fast would be to risk eternal damnation, or at least the wrath of the local priest. As you stand here frozen and uncertain, a memory surfaces last year. Sister Agnes from the nearby convent brought your family a basket of leftover bread and cheese. It was no grand feast, hardly more than dry crumbs and stale curds, but to your children it tasted like ambrosia. Your youngest, a boy of 7, nibbled that cheese with shining eyes until the last crumb vanished. He fell ill a fortnight later with a fever so high you feared you would lose him. Some said it was only coincidence. Others whispered cheese in Lent, a dangerous gift. You swallow hard looking up at Father Martin's austere face. He continues to speak of penance, of prayer, of spiritual purification. Yet you cannot ignore the knot tightening in your stomach, the cold dread that this devotion, this spiritual exercise might well claim your child's life if you fail to produce even the slightest sustenance beyond pottage. You step back into the winter sunlight, stumbling slightly on the icy path. Your breath catches as the wind cuts through your simple tunic. Around you, villagers gather in tight clusters, moving slowly, weighted by hunger. Some already show the signs of malnutrition, gaunt cheeks, hollowed eyes, trembling limbs. Yet still they follow the church's decree. There is no question of breaking the fast. Spiritual punishment outweighs mortal peril. Outside the churchyard, you see the grave of little Margaret. She died last spring during Lent while eating nothing but bread and water. Her parents paid for a simple wooden cross, but the cross is weathered now, nearly unreadable. Tears spring to your eyes, and you wipe them away quickly before anyone notices. 4 days into the fast, she developed a cough that turned into a fever, then into delirium. By the time the monk arrived with holy water, it was too late. Your neighbor Thomas, a robust man who once tilled a full acre of barley, is now a shadow of himself, his strength drained by the church's rules. He once boasted that he could handle any hardship, but the 5th day of Lent found him shaking violently, unable to stand. Sister Agnes visited him, called it God's test. But you heard her admit to another nun that Thomas was lucky she found him alive. Despite all this, you must obey, you must fast, you have no choice. Night falls and you return to your cottage. The hearth holds only cold embers nearly extinguished. Your wife lifts a small bucket of stew made from dried beans and cabbage into your hands. You know she strained the last of the ingredients from your meager pantry because meat is forbidden. Yet she also knows that if you do not eat something heartier soon, your strength will vanish entirely. Tonight's meal is thin, watery, lacking any hint of fat or flavor. Your spoon scrapes against the metal bowl, echoing in the stillness. The children watch silently, small faces, ghostly in the dim firelight. You hand them each a cup of thin, oat-based gruel. No milk, no eggs, certainly no meat. You force a smile, whispering, "Eat quickly, my loves. We must save energy for tomorrow." Tomorrow, the world remains unchanged. The fields are frozen, the well water is stagnant, and the church's demands are absolute. Hunger gnaws beneath your ribs, but more urgent than hunger is the fear of spiritual condemnation. You swallow the gruel. It burns your throat, but staves off a worse emptiness. Sleep eludes you. You lie on your straw-stuffed mattress, staring at the rough wooden beams overhead. Outside, snow falls lightly, drifting into the night. Inside, the silence is thick, broken only by the distant crow of a rooster and the faint scratch of rats in the corners. You whisper a prayer. You confess your sins quietly. "Forgive me, Lord, for wishing I could eat meat just this once." But the answer comes only in the empty hush, echoing back your own guilt and fear. And as you drift into a fevered slumber, you wonder, could the church's guidance intended to raise souls heavenward be quietly pushing bodies toward the grave? Dawn breaks with a pale, watery light. You awaken stiff and numb, your stomach knotting painfully. Today is Ash Wednesday, the very first day of Lent. You can already feel the weight of 40 days ahead bearing down on you, heavier than any chain. Your neighbor Margaret drags herself from the straw pallet. Her face is drawn and she can barely lift her head. You recall seeing her yesterday at the church. She held back tears as she received the ashen cross on her forehead, a visible sign of penance, a mark proclaiming devotion. But you wonder if the mark might also read condemned, as hunger-lorn bodies often die slowly beneath the church's goodwill. You rise and head outside. The courtyard is frosted over, gleaming dully under the gray sky. In the small pen by the barn, a single sheep waits quietly, eyes sad, breath ghosting in the cold air. This sheep belongs to the Lord. No peasant may slaughter it. It is reserved for the manners table at Easter. You know that in better years there might have been more than one, but this year taxes were high, the harvest poor, and so the Lord's flock is lean. You see no opportunity for mercy. The Lord expects his due, his sheep, his tithes, his obedience. You step back inside your dim cottage, closing the door against the cold. Morning light filters through the cracks, illuminating the tiny space. Your wife stands at the hearth, no fire yet lit. She holds a small bowl of oatmeal, water thin, and hints of dried herbs. There is no fat, no meat, no richness. She offers you the bowl. You nod, lifting it carefully to your lips. The oatmeal is barely warm, gritty between your teeth, lacking sweetness, lacking substance. Even the herbs taste diminished, a pale memory of summer's bounty. You drink slowly, mindful of every swallow. Already your limbs feel sluggish, your head thick with a fog you cannot shake. You finish the oatmeal, placing the empty bowl on the floor. Outwardly you appear obedient, faithful to the church's call. Inwardly you tremble. A knock at the door interrupts your thoughts. You open it to find Sister Agnes wrapped in a heavy woolen cloak, her face lined with concern. She carries a basket with the convent's seal, the sign of charity, of church-supplied sustenance for the needy. Forgiveness glimmers in her eyes. You invited her knowing that the church's charity might save you this Lent. She kneels to offer you a small loaf of convent-baked bread, lighter, whiter, softer than any you've tasted. With it, she presses a chunk of cheese into your hand, cheese you know you must not consume during Lent. Your heart thunders. This gift, holy, blessed, sacred, promises relief. Yet fear claws at you. If you eat this bread, you risk spiritual punishment. If you refuse, you risk starvation. Sister Agnes's voice is soft. My child, accept God's mercy in this gift. We are instructed, feed the hungry. Do not deny them. You shake, but it is Lent. She places a gentle hand on your wrist. Charity is never out of season. Trust in what the Lord provides. You nod gratefully, tears stinging your eyes. She leaves her cloak, swirling the basket's contents, clinking softly against wood. You step inside, closing the door. The bread and cheese rest heavily in your hand, life and death balance so precariously between your fingers. You ask yourself, is this divine providence or a test of faith that could condemn you if you betray the fast? You take a deep breath, closing your eyes, and decide hunger wins over fear. The bread is divine, the cheese is life. You eat. You taste the softness of the bread, the tang of cheese melting on your tongue. Your stomach relaxes slightly. Your limbs feel warmth returning. You savor each bite, grateful beyond measure. Yet somewhere in the recesses of your mind, doubt gnaws. Have you broken the fast? Have you broken the vow? Even as you eat, you wonder how long mercy will last. March forward through Lent and you discover the true complexity of charity and faith. On Fridays, you must fast entirely, no meat, no cheese, not even butter or eggs. You survive on bread and water. But now Sister Agnes arranges for you to receive a small bowl of soup, thin broth, simmered with a few leftover vegetables. It lacks flavor, lacks richness, yet it suffices. Your neighbors John and Margaret are not so lucky. They have 7 children. Their crops failed this year. They ask for charity at the abbey gates, kneeling with pale faces and trembling hands. Yet when they arrive, the line stretches, long scores of destitute faces waiting for loaves of bread, for salted fish, for scraps of cheese they must not eat. Sister Agnes offers them what remains after your own share. They leave with empty baskets and heavier hearts. In this you see the church's double edge. It demands sacrifice, spiritual, physical, through fasting rules that punish the poor more harshly than the wealthy. Yet it also offers charity, bittersweet relief, grudgingly distributed, always too little too late. One afternoon as Lent winds on and your own strength wanes, you overhear 2 villagers whispering. They say the abbey's stores are nearly empty. They sold much of their grain to nobles when prices spiked. Now the poor starve. Your stomach flips. Abbey's supposed sanctuary for the needy sold out to the rich. Your mind painfully traces cause and effect. The church's wealth grows as the people's suffer. Yet you cannot simply denounce the church. Would that be sacrilege? Would that condemn your soul? You find no answer. Only more hunger. Only more devotion constrained by limits. The church demands penance, demands fasting, demands obedience, yet sometimes seems blind to the famine pressing in upon your door. In this tension you realize fasting for faith can easily slip into fasting for famine. The reeds outside the abbey sway gently in the breeze as Lent draws near its end. Holy Week arrives and you feel thinner, weaker than ever. Your legs ache with fatigue. Your mind drifts with exhaustion. Yet you persist, clinging to hope that soon you will kneel before the cross on Easter morning, ashes washed away, spirit renewed. Easter dawn breaks gold and crimson across the horizon. You join the flock at dawn, eyes heavy, limbs trembling, but heart poised with anticipation. Behind you, John, once robust and strong, leans heavily on his staff. Margaret's youngest clings to her skirt's face, pinched from hunger, ribs faintly visible beneath her tunic. Inside the church, candles blaze, incense swirls. The choir sings hymns of resurrection. You stand shivering in the chill of the stone floor and watch the priest raise the consecrated host. A hush settles over the congregation, a sacred pause, a promise Christ is risen. Alleluia, you cry, voice cracking from disuse. The words feel strange on your lips, a fragile hope after 40 days of silence. Then comes the moment you've waited for, the blessing of the Easter feast. The church proclaims meat is now permitted, lamb, pork, eggs, cheese-rich delights reserved for this day. Your heart leaps. You follow neighbors outside to tables set hastily behind the church, adorned with plates of boiled eggs, freshly baked bread, roasted mutton, luxuries for which you barely allow yourself to hope. Your hands tremble as you accept a small hunk of cheese, a piece of roasted lamb. You bite into the lamb, juicy, salty, savory, and your eyes close as pleasure floods your senses. Never have you tasted anything so rich, so glorious. Tears prickle as you chew, release waves of warmth through your aching body. For this one moment, the toll of Lent fades. The ache of hunger, the fear of sickness, the weight of obedience dissipate as you eat. You share laughter with neighbors. You swap stories. You feel life coursing through your veins once more. Yet as the feast continues, you catch glimpses of sorrow in Margaret's eyes, her youngest child only half able to eat before collapsing into sleep. John eats sparingly, his strength sapped by Lent's demands. You realize these blessings are fleeting, fragile. Tomorrow the world outside this holy enclosure returns to its unrelenting reality fields, frozen once more. Rations dwindling, sickness waiting patiently. You take a last sip of ale, blessed and forbidden, no longer allowing the amber liquid to soothe your spare, crackling throat. You feel gratitude, but beneath it, a dark whisper persists. If the church's power to grant life through charity and feast is matched by its power to impose famine through fasting, then to whom do you truly owe your allegiance? The day wanes, the candles gutter low, and you step outside, carrying the warmth of Easter within you. Birds sing softly, a rare promise of spring. Beneath your feet, meadow grass peeks faintly from the thawing earth. For a moment you sense possibility. But then you remember next winter Lent will come again. The cycle will repeat, faith demands sacrifice. Sacrifice leads to suffering, and suffering will be your reality once more. You pause at the church gate, looking back at the tall spire, reaching for the gray sky. You whisper a final question, trembling on the edge of your lips. Is this divine influence meant to guide your soul, or is it the very force that consumes your body? And with that you turn toward home, hunger lingering in your bones, devotion lingering in your heart, caught forever between faith and famine. Number 9. The lavish banquet. Dangerous delicacies. Close your eyes. Imagine standing at the threshold of a great hall. Its massive oaken doors swung wide open, revealing a space illuminated by hundreds of flickering candles. The golden glow dances across vaulted ceilings, reflecting off polished stone floors and rows of richly upholstered chairs. Tapestries hang along the walls, their intricate threads depicting scenes of heroic battles and noble hunts. The scent of burning pine fills your nostrils, mingling with a heady melange of spices, cinnamon, clove, saffron, scenting the air in warm, exotic waves. This is no humble peasant gathering. This is a feast for the powerful, a banquet that transforms food into spectacle, turning every morsel into a statement of wealth and prestige. You take a hesitant step forward, drawn by the lavish display laid out before you, yet acutely aware of the gulf that separates you from these tables, groaning under their burdens. Your eyes sweep across the central oak table where platters gleam like precious metals. A whole boar roasts on a slowly rotating spit, its skin crackling and caramelized juices dripping onto glowing coals below. A swan, plucked, trussed, and reassembled to look as though it still soars, sits proudly atop a silver charger. Its feathers replaced by delicate slices of lean meat painted with saffron to glow like gold. Surrounding these grand centerpieces are smaller silver dishes heaped with delicacies, spiced pigeons, roasted venison, and intricately woven pies, whose crusts resemble miniature castles. Each pastry holds a secret filling, perhaps cream and almond, or minced meat, and fragrant dried fruit. As you step closer, the sound of joyous revelry washes over you. Courtiers in silken tunics and jeweled coifs laugh and chatter, wine goblets clinking in accompaniment to the scrape of fiddles and the deathly hush that falls each time a new dish is presented. The lord of the manor, resplendent in velvet and ermine, surveys the scene from a raised dais, his golden circlet shining in the candlelight. He raises a silver goblet, and a hush descends, anticipation so thick it feels like a tangible mist. You watch as the lord lifts his goblet and pronounces in a voice that somehow echoes through every corner of the hall. "Let the feast begin." A chorus of cheers erupts, and the first course is unveiled. Imagine the servants clad in sober grays, gliding silently through the ranks, each bearing trays of exotic fare fattened capons basted with honey. Loaves of bread whose dough has been tinted with safflower to glow like sunrise. Bowls of imported oranges, their rind glistening with dew, a fruit so rare it seems from another realm. All around, the scent of roasting meat is so intoxicating it makes your knees weak, yet you remain at the edge, a silent observer, acutely aware that you will never share in these spoils. As the meal begins, you notice the guests leaning forward, eager to sample every flavor. A noblewoman, her gown tracing the floor in silken waves, picks up a small pastry shaped like a swallow. She bites delicately, eyes closing in pleasure at the rich cream within, spiked with rosewater imported from the east. A knight seated nearby raises a dagger and carefully carves a slice from the roast boar, brushing a bit of spiced apple chutney atop each piece before eating it in one sumptuous bite. You, in contrast, stand uncomfortably at the back, uncertain of where to place your gaze. You feel out of place, trapped between awe and envy. Yet you cannot tear your eyes away from the spectacle before you. But while this feast glitters with extravagance, it conceals shadows you wouldn't expect. Imagine the vast kitchens hidden behind thick walls, hearths blazing fires, roaring smoke curling into the rafters. There, a small army of cooks and scullery maids bustle in frenetic wordless choreography. Blood from a freshly slaughtered deer drips from a butcher's block onto a rough wooden floor. Pigs' trotters hang from hooks awaiting preparation. Cauldrons bubble with lard and seasoned broth, sending up pungent fumes that sting the eyes. Picture a master cook named Guillaume. He stands at a massive wooden table, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, hands covered in fat and flour. Around him, underlings run back and forth, fetching spices from ceramic jars labeled pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, though the labels are smudged and barely legible. Guillaume hums softly, lost in concentration, as he places delicate sugar sculptures on platters destined for the hall. Some shapes gleam with real gold leaf, tiny castles, mythical beasts, even a portrait of the Lord himself molded in sugar paste. But let us focus on one seemingly innocuous dish, a spiced pottage of rabbit. Seared first in lamb's fat, then simmered for hours in a cauldron of wine and broth. It is meant to dazzle the senses, peppery, sweet, rich. The rabbit, once skinned, deboned, stuffed with herbs and dried fruits, now sits before you in a single generous bowl. The cook himself tasted it earlier, nodding with approval. Yet behind his satisfied expression lies a flicker of concern. The broth is a shade off the wine, a bit too sour. The meat barely cooked in the center. He tosses a strip of bread into the broth to test its clarity. Faint cloudiness remains. At that moment, the cook's face betrays slight panic. He knows what could happen if this dish is served as is. The rabbit, he realizes too late, came from a warren that recently suffered a brief outbreak of murrain, a mysterious livestock illness that killed sheep and cattle in neighboring villages. He suspects the rabbit's flesh might harbor similar unseen dangers. Yet there is no time to discard the stock. The feast must proceed. The Lord expects new dishes every few minutes, excess only tolerated by the highest aristocracy. And so with trembling hands, the cook scoops the pottage onto a grand silver tureen, covers it carefully, and sends it out on a covered tray. He prays silently as the runner darts through the corridors, spills into the great hall, and lifts the lid. A collective gasp escapes the guests as the rich smell wafts upward, smoky, heady, seductive. Some strain forward to inhale deeply. Others cross themselves. You peer carefully as a noble woman lifts a golden spoonful of pottage to her lips, eyes closing in anticipation. She chews, savoring the complex flavors. A single bead of sweat astride her brow is the only sign of the danger to come. The watchers in the hall have no inkling of the cook's terror. Moments later, she swallows. A tiny spasm flickers across her face. Was it a cramp? A moment's indigestion. The guests do not notice until she abruptly leans back, clutching her stomach. Her eyes widen in shock. A gasp ripples through the table. Wine goblets clatter to the floor. The hall descends quickly into confusion as another noble at the end of the table doubles over, clutching his side. The Lord himself stands abruptly, silk robes rustling like a wounded animal's cry. His guard encircles the stricken nobles while servants rush to their aid. The candles wobble in their candelabras, plunging parts of the hall into sudden shadow. A hush falls, suffocating oppressive. In the kitchen, Guillaume hears the crash as the tureen is overturned, hears the suppressed screams, the frantic shouting. He knows without question that something is terribly wrong. He clutches his chest, his heart pounding. He sees the pottage pot now congealing, its surface slick. He remembers tasting it earlier, and now he understands the broth was tainted. Too sour, spoiled. The rabbit half raw carried disease. And here in this glittering throne room, where the finest delicacies once promised triumph and glory, catastrophe strikes because of a single misstep, a moment's oversight in a world that refuses to tolerate imperfection. As you linger on the fringes, you freeze fear chilling your bones. You realize the truth: to feast among the elite is also to risk far more than hunger. One miscalculation, one tainted broth, one neglected spoilage could bring not just indigestion, but death. You turn away from the scene, careful not to look at bodies writhing on damask cushions, servants dashing about like panicked crows. You exit the hall, slipping through corridors lined with stolen tapestries, expensive drapes, the quiet hum of panic echoing behind you. Outside, night has fallen fully. The cold seeps into your bones as you walk swiftly down a narrow path toward home, leaving the chaos behind. You feel a shiver run through you. Moments earlier, those nobles with all their power and wealth lay at the mercy of spoiled food. If even they can fall victim to invisible danger, what hope have you? As you trudge home in the moonlit darkness, your mind reels luxury and peril side by side, a thin veil between a glorious feast and a fatal poison. The warmth of the candles, the laughter, the spectacle, all now feel like a fragile mask, a reminder that in medieval life, nothing is what it seems. And so beneath a sky veiled with stars, you find yourself asking a question that echoes louder than any church bell or banquet trumpets. If the most sumptuous feast in the land can so easily become a deadly trap, what other hidden dangers lurk within the foods we trust? With the echoes of clattering silver and panicked gasps still ringing in your ears, you hasten through silent corridors toward the kitchens that lie behind the great hall. The heavy wooden door swings open with a creak, revealing a scene of stunned chaos. The flicker of oil lamps casts shifting shadows across slate floors, puddles of spilled wine, overturned chairs, and abandoned trays. Cooks and scullery maids, faces ashen, stand motionless, staring at the scene of disaster. Guillaume, the master cook, leans against the far wall, his apron stained red from the boar he carved only hours ago. His eyes are red-rimmed, his face is pale as fine linen. He cups his trembling hands over his mouth as if lest he scream. Around him, terrified underlings gather broken dishes, their hands shaking so violently they can scarcely hold the shards of gilded porcelain. As you step closer, you catch fragments of hushed whispers. He died after 2 bites. She fell ill at once. I saw him vomit blood. It's the pestilence. God have mercy. A scullery maid edges past you, tears glistening in her eyes. She murmurs under breath, "The fish last night. Could it have been the cod?" But the cod was caught in clean waters. You watch as Guillaume collapses onto a stool, burying his face in his hands. Guilt ripples across his shoulders. He knows that one small oversight doomed those noble guests. And yet, what could he have done? The sun had been high when he bought the rabbit. It looked fresh then. The broth seemed fine. But the slightest turn, the merest lapse, and death waited hungrily. You back away, heart pounding. Great wealth can buy you the finest kitchen utensils, the rarest spices, even cooks imported from distant lands. But not immunity. The difference between a grand banquet and a hearse ride is often as slim as a spoiled bit of meat. You hurriedly retrace your steps out of the kitchen, determined to distance yourself from this horror, from the reminder that even the grandest tables can serve death alongside delicacy. Night has deepened into a heavy black. The sky above seems endless and indifferent as you walk along the frozen moat that encircles the castle grounds. The wind carries with it the faint lingering smell of opulence, dried fruits, honeyed wine, spiced pastry, tangy sweet, yet somehow ominous. Before you lies the village, small sparse clusters of rough-hewn huts, smoke rising from sap-greased thatch. You pull your cloak tighter, pressing on toward the familiar, the humble. Within your own cottage, the remnants of your meager supper await a single slice of coarse bread, a bowl of pottage warmed by a dying ember. The scents are meager, unremarkable, yet they whisper of safety, of home, of survival in a world where even the grandest feast can snatch life away. You kneel by the hearth, warming your hands as the embers glow faintly. In the corner, your neighbor John lies shivering upon a pallet of straw, his belly swollen, a hollow groan escaping his lips. Last week he ate meat fresh from the butcher's hand, only to succumb to severe cramps and fever. They say it was tainted, yet no one knows how. His wife tends to him damp cloths pressed to his forehead, herbs crushed into poultices on a small wooden table. Outside, your children sleep in the hush, their small forms curled in thin blankets. You breathe a small prayer, reaching for your bowl of pottage. As you stir it slowly, the heat rising in gentle curls, you remember the lavish banquet, swan-painted gold pies shaped like castles, sugar sculptures that defied belief. Yet behind every shimmer lay shadows, a single spoiled rabbit, one tarnished apple, a trace of rot invisible to the naked eye. You dip your spoon, the pottage tastes of earth, of survival, of simplicity. You whisper thanks and eat slowly, mindful of each spoonful. A gnawing question takes shape in your mind. If the nobility bathed in luxury, surrounded by servants, cannot escape the peril of poisoned or spoiled delights, what hope do you have? Tomorrow you will work the fields, plant seeds, repair fences, tend the small fire that offers you warmth. Here every meal is a negotiation between hunger and hazard. A stale slice of bread might be safer than a fresh, suspicious hunk of meat. A pale turnip might nourish less than a richly spiced pie, but at least it carries fewer invisible threats. For you, food is never merely food. It is life, livelihood, and sometimes fatal attraction. You stand, extinguish the last ember with a gentle press of your palm, and step toward your straw pallet. You lie down, the cold floor seeping into your bones. Your mind drifts, replaying the banquet's opulence, rotating spit sugar swans, the Lord's triumphant gaze, and then the horror, the pottage that killed. Your eyes close and you drift into a restless slumber, haunted by the thought that in medieval times every meal is a gamble, and even the grandest feast may conceal death's silent promise. As you sink into sleep, one final question lingers, whispered on the edge of consciousness, drawing you forward toward the truths yet to come. If the finest dishes serve death as readily as delight, how can anyone truly trust their next bite, regardless of status, wealth, or faith? Number 10. Inequality at the dinner table. Close your eyes. Imagine standing at the edge of a great meadow, the early morning mist still clinging to the ground like a damp blanket. Birds call faintly in the distance. The world feels hushed, as though pausing for breath before igniting the day. You walk down a narrow dirt path, wearing worn leather shoes caked with yesterday's mud. The path leads you to a small clearing surrounded by low stone walls. On one side of the wall lies the gathering place of the peasants' rows of humble huts, with thatched roofs, smoke curling from small hearths. The air is tinged with wood smoke, animal dung, and the faint scent of simmering pottage. Children play in the dirt, their laughter muffled by poverty. Chickens strut between the huts, picking at scattered scraps. A thin cow grazes listlessly near a trough overflowing with water so murky it seems more like muddy soup. On the other side of the wall stands the Lord's Manor, a grand, imposing structure of dark stone and ornate wooden bits. Flags flutter on tall poles. Guards clad in polished armor patrol the perimeter. The estate's fields stretch like a green carpet bordered by neat rows of hedges. The Lord's servants carry baskets of fresh fruit and barrels of ale along gravel paths. A gentle aroma of roasted meats drifts from a distant kitchen, mingling with the clean scent of trimmed lawns and blossoming rose bushes. You observe both sides of this dividing line, feeling acutely aware of every disparity. On the peasant's side, the poor live by meager rations and constant toil. On the Lord's side, the elite revel in abundance. Today is a special occasion, the annual harvest festival. On this day, the Lord grants his peasants a small respite, permission to gather leftover grain to witness the grandeur of a feast held beyond their reach. You step forward with others, crossing through a low gate that divides the two worlds. A single guard nods curtly, but does not impede you. He knows you belong here today. As you pass through, the contrast strikes you like a blow. The grass underfoot is softer, greener, no longer trampled by barefoot children. The gravel path is newly raked smooth beneath your feet. Servants sweep aside fallen leaves and stray twigs with long-handled brooms that never touch the dirt of the peasant lanes. They smile nervously at you as you move past fear or pity you cannot tell. You emerge into a wide courtyard ringed with long trestle tables. At their center stands a raised dais where the Lord and his retinue will sit. The tables are already laden with platters, whole boars glistening with honey glaze, massive wheels of cheese, pale as ivory baskets brimming with grapes so plump they seem about to burst. Golden loaves of bread baked to a perfect pillowy softness line polished wooden boards. bowls of creamy porridge steam gently topped with fresh berries and honeyed butter. You hesitate, feeling a pang of longing but also a familiar pang of envy. So close and yet so remote. You who subsist on coarse barley gruel and hard rye bread stand before delicacies you have never tasted, dishes that are lifetimes away from the pottage you drag from pots at dawn. A chairman resplendent in velvet and gold steps forward. He raises a jeweled goblet high. The clink of silver against silver rings out and the air falls into a hush. He speaks in a rich, commanding voice echoing across the hall. Let this harvest feast be a symbol of our Lord's benevolence and the prosperity of his domain. Let none starve this day. At his words, a cheer rises, but it feels hollow. You look down at your threadbare tunic, the same garment you've worn for 2 winters, and at your coarse shoes the soles nearly worn through. You catch the eye of a neighbor, old Thomas, whose back curves like a broken bow from years of toil. His gaunt face brightens slightly, but a shadow passes across his eyes. You both know that fresh food will be fleeting. Tomorrow the fields will require labor once more, and the same meager rations will return. You and a handful of fellow peasants step forward, tentatively handed small wooden bowls by trembling servers. Each bowl contains a single wing of roast chicken, barely more than half a wing picked clean of succulent meat scarred from carving. The price of meat is too great for full portions. Your neighbor Margaret, her children huddled at her side, receives only crumbs, scraps from the Lord's own table offered politely but without genuine warmth. She tries to smile, but her eyes betray hunger. You lift the tiny wing, its skin crackling with fat, and draw it closer. The aroma is heavenly smoky, spiced, inviting. You nibble at the edges, devouring the small bit of meat with tender reverence. The taste explodes on your tongue, savory sweet with hints of herbs you cannot name. It is the richest morsel you have ever tasted. Most of your neighbors are trembling with gratitude, tears in their eyes. Yet in that moment of sublime flavors, there is a bitter aftertaste, the knowledge that this small pleasure is not for you, not for them, every day. As you eat, your eyes wander across the tables, taking in the stark disparity. A long table by the dais groans under platters of roast venison and swan. Silver chalices brim with spiced wine. The Lord's children, dressed in fine brocade, sit at the high table with servants fanning them and feeding them with gilded spoons. Their laughter rings out careless, unburdened. They play with expensive toys beneath the table, their faces flushed with warmth and indulgence. A hush settles when the Lord rises to make a speech. He praises the diligence of his peasants, speaks of the bountiful year of the blessings of heaven. His voice is measured, gracious. He insists that none shall lack food and that charity will flow freely. We owe our prosperity to your labor, he declares. I give you this gift in thanks. But before his words fully subside, you watch a group of riders approach the manor gate, bearing sacks of grain, the tithe owed to his lordship. The same peasants who receive a single wing today must provide 1/5 of their harvest grain, measured, weighed, and delivered to those gilded doors inch by painstaking inch. Your heart sinks. The gift of a scrap of meat is overshadowed by the unseen hand reaching into your fields, taking more than you can spare. You taste the promise of charity, but beneath it lies injustice. You glance at Margaret again. Her children stare at their bowls. 2 share a single bowl, spooning the meager pottage between them. You reach across and slip her a small sliver of your chicken wing. She grasps it gratefully, pressing it to her lips, tears shining. You wonder, will she remember this gesture tomorrow when she tucks her children into straw for the night, knowing that hunger will visit them again before dawn? A hush falls, replaced by polite applause. The Lord steps down from the dais, taking a seat among his family. The feast continues, servants bringing new platters, pouring wine, refilling goblets. Music begins, minstrels playing flutes and lutes, encouraging laughter and revelry. Camp followers stand nearby, quietly dividing leftovers, discarded skins, burnt edges, scraps that hold no place on a noble's plate. Your gaze follows the whispering stream of scraps, realizing that life for peasants is a cycle of giving and taking, receiving and starving. You remember the harvest fields awaiting you. The barn nearly empty. The children's bellies hollow again. Come morning. As the sun sets, you feel the feast's warmth fading, replaced by a creeping dread. The night air grows cold, and the prospect of returning to your cottage feels unbearable, back to the same hearth, the same meager fare, the same daily struggle. You stand at the fringes, clutching the remains of a once glorious wing bones stripped nearly bare. You have tasted the world, the Lord's enjoy its richness, its excess, its privilege. Yet you also glimpse the darkness that shadows their generosity. The unseen demands the heavy taxes, the unspoken cruelties. This is inequality laid bare. On one side of the table, abundance and security. On the other, scarcity and toil. You wonder if a single scrap can bring tears of gratitude, yet so easily be taken away. What truly sustains a community? As you gather with other peasants to return beyond the walls, you step carefully over trampled waste, discarded napkins, half-eaten grapes that cling to their stems, a stray marshmallow of sugar fallen from a child's hand. Each item a symbol of wealth that does not belong to you. The night descends, and you find yourself retracing the same path to your village. The torches lining the Lord's courtyard grow dim behind you. The comfortable glow of wealth gives way to the dim lamp in your humble cottage. Inside, the children stir, eyes heavy. You hand them a small slice of bread, stale already, but it will have to do. They eat without complaint, settling down quickly, lulled by exhaustion. You sit by the hearth, the embers nearly spent, and wonder at the duality of this day's feast. The magnificence, the injustice, the fleeting nature of charity, and the cruelty of disparity. As you drift towards sleep, a question surfaces in the stillness, echoing louder than any clinking goblet or distant laughter. If a single feast can both uplift and remind you of your worthlessness, what is the true cost of living on the other side of those dividing walls? When dawn breaks, the world feels too bright, too cruel. You step outside, greeted by a pale, wintry sun. Frost glistens on the rooftops of your neighbors' huts like a cruel glitter, beautiful yet bitterly cold. You recall last night's feast, the sumptuous sights and sounds lingering in memory platters, gleaming beneath candlelight songs, echoing off vaulted ceilings, laughter ringing out in celebration. Yet beneath that splendor was an undercurrent of tension, of hunger masked by opulence. Today the Lord's feast is over. The long tables are stripped bare. Servants clear away golden dishes, polishing and stowing them for the next grand occasion. The music fades, replaced by the soft echoes of wooden bowls being stacked, hearth doors closing, and the distant tinkle of silverware returning to kitchens. You linger at the perimeter, watching as the last of the Lord's guests depart. Their furs and velvets brush the frozen ground as they mount horses' sashes, swinging horses stamping in impatience. There is no glance toward the peasants left behind, no acknowledgement of the gulf between your worlds. A stable boy leans over the stone wall, watching you quietly. He reaches into his tabard and offers a single small crust of white bread, something you would never normally receive. A gift from his lord's table crumb from the highborn. He meets your eyes, his gaze steady as if he knows how far away you stand from his master's world. Guilt or pity, you cannot tell. You nod your thanks, accepting the bread with trembling fingers. It tastes even sweeter in the cold air, soft, fresh, utterly different from the coarse rye or barley you usually consume. You share it with your children later, each small piece a treasure beyond measure. But as the day wears on and you return to the work of repairing fences and gathering wood, the sweetness fades, replaced by a familiar ache. Hunger returns unrelenting. The single gift of bread did not sustain you. It was but a token, a reminder of generosity, yes, yet a cruel one. You think of the tithe that must be delivered, 5 bushels of grain from your harvest to the Lord. 5 bushels that represent half a season's worth of labor, half your family's survival. You trudge toward your field, joining others bent beneath the sky's pale glow. A bitter wind scours the bones. Each breath cuts like a knife. With trembling hands, you begin to repair a section of fence broken by last night's revelry. A stray torch, a careless horse, a scuffle among drunken guests. The splintered wood is your burden now, your sweat seeping onto frozen earth as you hammer replacement posts into the ground. Your neighbor Tomas stands nearby, silent as always, his gaze distant. He murmurs in a low voice, "They ate well last night, and now they want our barley. They'll have the finest bread in the county while we starve." His words hang in the air, bitter as wormwood. You nod, eyes downcast. The boundary between feast and famine is not merely physical, it is moral, social, and unbridgeable chasm. Midday sun sheds little warmth. You break for a meager meal, cold porridge warmed over a flickering ember, a crust of barley bread scraped from yesterday's batch. You remember the sight of wealthy lords reclining on velvet cushions, their goblets brimming with spiced wine, while you must choke down watery pottage flavored only by a sprig of dried thyme. Your stomach churns. A hollow emptiness gnaws away at your spirit. You wonder how the lords sleep in beds of down while you sleep on sacks of straw, how they can afford luxuries beyond your imagination while your children shiver under threadbare blankets. You glance toward the distant manor. Its windows gleam curtained in crimson velvet, the warm glow of hearth fires visible behind. You sense music drifting faintly, a minstrel's lute, another song celebrating abundance. Meanwhile, your children sit huddled in a circle on your dirt floor. They whisper formulas for counting barley grains, imagining a dream one day they might break free of this cycle, walk through gilded halls, taste wine that does not sting the throat, lie under blankets soft as sky. But you shake your head, whispering a refusal. That world is not for them. That world belongs to others. Your own mind returns to this sentence, heavy yet true: the richer feast, the poorer starve. As the afternoon wanes, an elderly monk from the abbey approaches with a parchment in his hands, riding a lean mule. His cassock is threadbare hem, stained with mud. His eyes burn with quiet intensity. He dismounts and draws you and others aside, addressing you in a voice soft but insistent. The Lord has ordered a new levy, he says. This season's taxes are due in full, no exceptions. Your knees go weak. You clutch the wooden post of the fence as if it might anchor you against this tide of cruelty. You look at the parchment, your pulse pounding. The numbers unveil themselves, bushels and bushels demanded more than you can imagine giving. Tears blur your vision. You think of last night's scrap of bread. You think of Tomas's barley bread gone before it was fully baked. Hunger is never far. The monk shifts uncomfortably, as if regretting delivering this terrible news. Yet he must obey. His faith demands obedience to the church, and the church in turn demands loyalty to the Lord. In the medieval hierarchy, the poor are but the base of a pyramid whose apex towers in gilded splendor. You look across the manor's grounds again, its gardens trimmed, its fountains flowing, its stables full of horses that paw impatiently. Each sight intensifies the injustice. Here the wealthy thrive while you fight to salvage meager sustenance. But as the monk departs, his mule's hooves stirring the dust, you sense something else, an ember of anger glowing faintly within you. The world beyond these walls feels stolen from you. Land, grain, meat, water, all parceled out by birthright rather than need. As dusk falls, you retreat to your cottage with a heavy heart. Your wife greets you at the door, her eyes sorrowful. The children hover near, sensing dread. You set aside the empty pouches you would have used to gather grain. Left over there is none. The Lord's field is swept clean. No mercy, no scraps for you today. Inside the cottage, a single flickering taper offers scant light. You gather the small ways you have learned to survive: a handful of dried beans, a few turnips pulled from the frost, a sip of weak ale from last night's ration. Your wife pours a bowl of thin pottage for each child. Their bellies rumble. You swallow the last of your beans, trying to taste gratitude. You nibble a turnip with trembling lips, tasting cold earth, a faint bitterness. You force a smile for your children's sake. One bites into a small piece of turnip, face puckered with surprise. Yet he nods as though savoring an unexpected delicacy. You brush a kiss across his brow, a single tear tracing a path down your cheek. You whisper a silent question that trembles on your lips, carried by the hush of the freezing night. If the world is divided between those who feast and those who starve, if your life depends on leftover scraps and cruel taxes, what hope remains for true equality, for justice at the very dinner table? And as you settle onto your straw mat, darkness and doubt entwined, you drift into uneasy sleep, haunted by the question that will guide you into tomorrow's struggle. Number 11. The famine years. Eating to survive or surviving to eat. Close your eyes. Imagine a world where the sun's warmth falters in midsummer, where skies gray and heavy linger far longer than summer, should suffocating fields beneath an unwelcome chill. Picture the crops: wheat, barley, oats, sprouting weakly stalks, stunted by relentless rains. You walk through the fields in a thin mist, your boots sinking into soft mud, each step sucking at your feet, as though the earth itself seeks to pull you under. The year is 1315. The corn harvest, once your lifeline, has failed. The rains began in spring and refused to let go. Too much water turned furrows into ponds. Seeds rotted beneath the mud, hungry mouths awake to a long, unrelenting drought of the soul more than of earth. This year the great famine begins. In your memory, harvest seasons were times of hope, bundles of grain stacked high, families working shoulder to shoulder to bring in the yield. But now fields, barren hedgerows brimming with fungus fruit shriveled on the trees. Each day you rise to the same dread. What will you eat today? Tomorrow? The next week? Dawn finds you in your meager cottage, the thatched roof, leaky rainwater sneaking in through the winter cracks. The children lie huddled beneath worn blankets, 3 of them, mouths moving as if whispering prayers in their sleep. You cannot blame them for praying. You do the same. You break off a corner of hard grayish bread stale 2 days now, and hand it to your youngest. She bites half-heartedly, then begins to cry. The bread tastes sour gritty, near inedible. It offers no comfort. Outside, villagers gather at the manor, pleading for scraps. You join them, tattered garments clinging to bones grown gaunt. A woman collapses beside you, her basket empty, her eyes rolling back as she murmurs, "Please, a scrap." But the steward pushes past, carrying sacks of grain heaped for the Lord's table. No charity flows, only indifference. Desperation grips your heart as you return home to empty pots and restless children. You remember stories of lean times of those who ate dogs or horses, tales so horrid they seemed mere myths. Yet now you know they are closer to truth than any fairy tale. You step into the gloom of the kitchen, the hearth cold embers extinguished. In the corner stands a tub of last year's salted pork, cured, but now smelling rank and bitter. Some scrawl of memory tells you that adding water and herbs might make it edible. You draw a shallow breath and slice a sliver. The knife rasping on the rind echoes in the stillness. Each slice seems a cruel mockery of sweetness you once knew. You place the sliver into a pot of tepid water and set it on a sputtering hearth. It takes hours for the embers to glow. You stoke carefully, your hands calloused and worn. A faint steam rises as you stir. Eventually the pork softens barely. You ladle a small portion into a bowl, dust your table with a thin layer of stale barley flour to serve as makeshift thickener, and hand the bowl to your wife. She tastes, hesitates, then offers it to the children. They swallow greedily, tears glinting in their wide eyes. Each mouthful brings relief, if only fleeting. But beneath the slurp and the gulp lies a bitter reminder this is not nourishment. This is survival. The day drags on. You venture out searching fields for wild plants, nettles for tea, dandelion roots for stew acorns that you grind into a bitter flour. Everyone in the village does the same scrambles for lichenbark weeds. You remember when these were nothing more than footnotes in a farmer's handbook. Now they bear the weight of life itself. As you gather roots from a soggy ditch, you catch sight of a thin traveler, someone you don't recognize, making his way along a rutted path. He looks half-dead, sunken cheeks, ragged clothes caked in mud. You stare as he collapses near a withered tree head, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Others pass by, heads down, ignoring him. A child cries for her mother. Sound shrivels into silent dread. You approach the stranger kneeling beside him. He coughs weakly, blood at his lips. You tear a scrap of cloth from your tunic and wipe his face. He clutches your hand briefly, eyes gleaming more from life than from hope. He whispers one word, hunger. Then his hand falls limp. You look into his face, sunken, hopeless, and know without question that he will not rise again. And you realize you too might be his shadow in days to come. The great famine is ruthless. It does not ask permission. It does not discriminate much between young or old, noble or peasant. Yet the impact upon your world is not equal. The wealthy retreat behind walls, burning grain spores and reserving stores in dark cellars. They feed their livestock while your cows, too thin to milk, wander abandoned. You hear rumors that some lords are paying exorbitant sums to purchase grain from distant lands. Italian wheat, French barley shipping in wealth to fill their storerooms, leaving peasants with empty fields. One morning you awaken to the distant peal of bells. It is a funeral for the entire village, the third this week. You walk to the small cemetery, your feet crunching on frozen mud. The priest stands by a shallow trench, gold-embroidered vestments gleaming absurdly against the gray sky. Around him, shivering villagers in threadbare cloaks bear wooden crosses. One by one, they lay their dead into the grave. A mother who starved a child, who shriveled away a neighbor, who collapsed mid-harvest. The air drips with sorrow. The priest intones incomprehensible words, Latin you do not understand. But no prayer can change what comes next. Another body, another death tomorrow. This is the crescendo of misery each new day. A little more hunger, a little more fear. Families vanish, leaving empty huts forever locked. Fields, once parcels of promise, become silent memorials to lives lost. The wind whistles through broken doors, carries the faintest odor of corpses buried too shallow, rising in unsteady currents. You stand by your own threshold, looking out at nothing but empty fields and skeletal cows. Your children huddle close, eyes hollow. They clutch thin blankets, desperate for warmth, for hope, for any morsel of promise. You gather them, stepping inside, closing the door against the world, against famine, grief, uncertainty. Inside, you search for scraps, residual bags of beans, dried peas, barely enough for one night. You count portions with trembling hands, 3 small pieces for 3 children, 1 larger for your wife, a smaller for yourself. Each bite carries the weight of promise. Eat slowly, or you'll have nothing for tomorrow. You whisper quiet words, "Trust the Lord. He will provide." But the words echo within hollow. You are not certain you believe them anymore. Outside, the wind moans through broken shingles, promising more rain. You begin to wonder how many more storms, how many more harvests will fail before this nightmare ends. And as you prepare to serve these final bites, you ask yourself a question that lingers hotter than hunger and deeper than fear. In a world where famine trims every field and starves every hearth, what does it truly mean to survive? The sun barely rises as you awaken yet again, bones aching, stomach twisting in protest. You look at the bowl of thin grayish porridge warming over a flickering ember. You stir it mindlessly, a few barley grains, a handful of foraged greens boiled to exhaustion. Last night's ration is all that remains. Your children crawl from their beds of straw. Their eyes are hollow bodies weakened by days without enough to eat. You slide a small portion of porridge into each wooden bowl. They swallow in silence, chewing slowly as though each bite could be their last. Outside, the world is muted. No birdsong, no bustling farm workers. Only low clouds and mute fields. The frost has returned, lending the earth a brittle chill. You step outside after tending the hearth, catching sight of your neighbor Tomas, standing beside a pale horse. He stares at the beast with hollow eyes. The horse is now old, too weak to pull a plow, too thin to ride. Its ribs protrude like fence posts. Tomas prepares to do the unthinkable. He must slaughter it lest his family go hungry. You move close, heart hammering. "Tomas," you say softly, "is there no way?" He shakes his head, voice taut. "The cow died last week. The sheep are gone. If I keep the horse, my children starve. Better the beast than them." You nod, sharing his grief. The horse's eyes meet yours, dull, weary. You remember when Tomas's boy learned to ride that very horse last summer, laughing as he galloped across the pasture. Now both boy and horse stare blankly, starved of strength and spirit. Tomas walks away slowly, clutching a crude knife. Within moments, a single cry breaks the silence, a deep, anguished wail as the life drains from the horse. Tomas's daughter covers her ears, weeping quietly. You look away, heart twisting in sorrow. In your own hearth, you pour the last drops of thin porridge into your own bowl and stir in a handful of ground acorns. Your lips purse at the bitterness. You recall old tales in times of dire need. Your ancestors ground acorns and mixed them with flour to stretch their rations. The result was gritty, sour, nearly inedible. Yet it kept them alive. You remember tasting it once as a child, but the memory is faint, overpowered by hunger or by shame. You take a tentative sip. The acorn mash cracks like sandpaper between your teeth. Still you swallow. There is no other choice. By midday, you decide to venture toward the stream where cattails grow along the icy banks. You wrap yourself in a thin woolen cloak and set out, the children following, eager for any scrap. The path is soggy, broken by ruts and puddles. Each step is an effort, your legs heavy, your breath short. You reach the stream ice forming along the edges. You kneel and scrape away the frozen film, lifting a cupful of water to your lips. It tastes faintly sweet, perhaps because of the cold, perhaps because you are dying of thirst. You hand the cup to your oldest daughter, whose mouth opens eagerly. Then you tie a length of coarse cloth beneath your arm. Half will dry fish caught yesterday, the rest uncertain. You fish cautiously, using a bent pin and a few scraps of thread. You've caught trout before, but now the fish are scarce. Some have washed downstream, moribund, belly up, whitened by the cold. You manage to hook a small, sickly little fish, half starved. It shivers in your hand, eyes glassy. You whisper a prayer, then twist the pin with a quiet finality. Walking home, you hold the limp fish in your hand. Your children trail behind, heads down. All day you feel the weight of that small life in your palm, a single death that might sustain 6. You wrap the fish in a scrap of cloth and place it in a pot over smoldering embers. Hours later, you smell the faintly sweet scent of fish boiled to the point where it nearly dissolves. You ladle the broth into small cups, just enough to wet the inside of starving stomachs. Your youngest sips slowly, eyes glassy with tears. "Mama," he whispers, "thank you." You want to assure him everything will be all right, but you cannot lie, not entirely. You feel the cold seep deeper into your bones. You feel the turnip skins in your stew more than the fish's nourishment. Everything is thin, stretched beyond its limits. Your heart, your spirit, your children's hope. That night you lie beside your wife and feel her body tremble with each breath. She coughs softly, one of those racking, blood-tinged coughs. You brush her hair aside and see dark circles under her eyes. You wonder if she will see tomorrow's sunrise. In that moment, you will not accept hope. Instead, you confront the harsh truth in these famine years. Life and death hang in the balance of each bite and each breath. As you drift into uncertain sleep, your last thought is a quiet question that echoes in the darkness, threatening to wake you even before dawn. When food itself becomes a weapon of survival, scarce, dangerous, tainted, what does it mean to truly live? Number 12. The spice trade. Flavors worth dying for. Close your eyes. Imagine a dawn-lit harbor on the coast of Venice, narrow canals glinting in the mist. Gondolas drift silently, their black hulls nearly disappearing into the gray calm of the water. The scent of brine hangs thick in the air, mingling with the faintest trace of cinnamon and clove drifting from distant ships. In the cool morning light, you feel both excitement and an unspoken dread, as though you stand at the threshold of worlds both wondrous and perilous. It is the year 1340, and you have journeyed here after weeks of walking from your village in the Alps. Your feet are blistered, your cloak heavy with mud, but you carry with you a single chest sturdy pine bound in iron. Its contents could transform your life, or end it. You step onto the docks, the wooden planks creaking under your weight. The morning bustle surrounds you, sailors hauling crates, merchants haggling over silk and copper, porters staggering under sacks of grain. But you move toward the ship that will carry you eastward, perhaps to Alexandria, perhaps to Antioch or beyond. You do not know exactly where. That is the mystery and the allure of the spice trade. As you approach the vessel, its prow carved with a carving of a lion, its sails still furled, you catch sight of the captain, a tall, gaunt man with a weathered face, eyes sharp as flint. He watches you, expression inscrutable, then gestures toward your chest. You kneel to unlatch the heavy iron lock. Inside lie vials of cinnamon quills, peppercorns black as polished stones, jars of saffron threads the color of sunset nestled next to cinnamon sticks, and shards of turquoise blue lapis lazuli. You can feel the weight of these treasures as though they were gold, and in a sense they are. The captain nods and motions to his crew. 2 burly sailors lift your chest and stow it below deck among hundreds of other precious parcels destined for markets you can only dream of. You climb aboard, stepping carefully past coils of rope and barrels of water. Other travelers stand about a cloaked monk bearing a scroll of Latin prayers, a wealthy merchant in silken robes inspecting a bundle of pearls, an Eastern trader with dark skin and bright, curious eyes. They all share one thing. They chase the same distant promise, the promise of spices. On deck, the sea stretches out in all directions, gray waves rolling languidly under an uncertain sky. A single gull cries overhead, wings beating steadily against the wind. Behind you, the opulent world of Venice seems a distant memory. Ahead lies the unknown. As the anchor lifts, the ship creaks and the prow cuts through the water. You taste salt on your lips and sense the enormity of the journey, months of sailing around jagged coastlines, through storm-lashed seas, past pirate-infested waters, all for a handful of spices that will fetch a king's ransom in Europe. You lean against the railing, watching the shoreline recede, cobbled alleys, domes of churches, and the red tile roofs of merchant houses shrinking into a misty blur. Already the wind whips at your hair, carrying news of distant lands. Nearby, a sailor mumbles about the dangerous strait at the Cape, and barbarian raids near the Levant. You shudder. This voyage is no mere trade mission. It is a crucible of risk and reward where fortunes are won or lost with the tossing of dice and the crash of waves. Days pass. The ship encounters its first trial. A sudden squall sweeps in from the northwest. The wind shrieks through rigging, tearing sails until they flap uselessly. The crew scrambles like insects, lashing ropes, lowering awnings, scrambling to secure barrels top-heavy with water and wine. You cling to the railing as the deck tilts sharply, waves lashing against the hull, drenching you with icy spray. Salt water stings your eyes. In the chaos, crates shift, one topples, spilling its contents of rice and dates, which quickly slide into the sea. Hours later, the storm abates, leaving battered sails and frayed nerves. The cook yells for help, hauling aboard a cask of flour that nearly fell overboard. The ship's carpenter hammers, hurriedly repairing a splintered plank near the stern. In the midst of this, a young deckhand glimpses a flash of color, a shard of cinnamon barrel staves washed overboard, caught in the flotsam. He stares at it, whispering, "Even the wind wants a taste." Despite the trial, the winds calm the following day. The ship continues onward, passing by islands that promise fresh water and green meadows. The crew lowers a small boat to retrieve fresh fish and fill barrels. You stand on deck helping haul baskets of silver-scaled trout, breathing the fresh ocean air, savoring the momentary respite from fear. Yet you know that the true test lies beyond. The Mediterranean still stretches ahead, and beyond that the Red Sea and the legions of dangers that dwell there. Finally, after weeks at sea, the ship edges into the narrow channel leading to Alexandria. Low white buildings and minarets appear on the horizon, a glint of sunlight on domed roofs. You step off the plank onto the bustling docks. The market explodes with life men in flowing robes selling carpets, baskets piled high with pomegranates, mountains of turmeric glowing like embers, sacks of black pepper darker than earth itself. You taste the air thick with the pungent scent of cardamom and nutmeg. Your heart pounds as you join the throng, paying a local trader with Venetian coins for a small pouch of black pepper. He weighs it carefully, nods and wraps it in leather. You cradle the pouch, its contents warm in your hand. Each tiny sphere is a promised flavor more precious than gold, a treasure to be peddled back in Europe. But behind this vibrant display lies a harsh truth. You overhear merchants arguing over prices, venomous bargains struck over the remains of shipwrecks, disputes settled with daggers drawn. You glimpse grim lists of taxes and duties imposed by local rulers, tolls exacted from every sack of spice, every gilded chest. Traders talk in hushed tones of Bedouin bandits lying in wait in the desert, exacting protection money before caravans can pass. That night, you retire to a modest inn near the harbor, a wooden structure with vines creeping along its cracked walls. You share a small room with 3 other merchants, a Greek trader nursing a bald spot on his scalp, a Persian merchant whose beard twists into a single braid, and a young Italian boy whose eyes are so bright they seem to glow in the dim lamplight. You talk quietly over a meager supper of flatbread and goat's milk, sharing tales of narrow escapes, attacks by pirates off Crete, desert foxes, snatching goods from caravans, scorpions hiding among dates near Aleppo. In the candle's flicker, you thumb through your little pouch of peppercorns, turning them over between stained fingers. Each one is a prize, but also a potential curse. You wonder if a single ship can be lost to storm, if a single bandit can strip a caravan bare. How can you ever trust that these precious spices will make it back to medieval Europe? You vet your options carefully. You could attempt the overland route across the Levant through Anatolia down to Venice over the Alps, but that means long desert crossings, tolls at every posted checkpoint, and bribes to every petty official. You could try a different route around Africa, but no one's yet charted that fully, and rumors speak of monsters in the deep. You weigh the pepper between thumb and forefinger, dark wrinkled spheres holding worlds within. Finally, you decide to risk the return by sea down the Red Sea to Aden, around the Horn of Africa, back into the open ocean, then north along the coast of East Africa, into the Atlantic, around the Pillars of Hercules, and into the Mediterranean. Months at sea, many unknowns. But the spice's value demands you try. You swallow hard, and tuck the pouch safely within your cloak. At dawn, the harbor wakes again. Sailors shout, gulls squawk, horses whinny in the corral. You board a larger dhow destined for Aden, trading your pouch of pepper for passage, and a handful of others with similar chests of ginger cloves and saffron. The dhow drifts out into the harbor, sails unfurling lazily. Venice, the only world you ever truly knew, recedes behind you, a patchwork of rooftops, bell towers, and starlit canals. As the dhow enters the open sea, your mind drifts to home. The mule that carried your family's meager possessions for generations. The small hut where your wife and children wait the fields lying barren through winter's chill. You clutch the pouch of pepper again, each grain a spark of hope. Yet even as you gaze westward, a darker question settles in your mind, hotter than any spice's sting. When you journey halfway around the world, risking pirates, storms, and your very life for a mere handful of flavor, what does it say about the world that deems such a perilous trade necessary? Days bleed into nights as the dhow carries you down the Red Sea along sun-bleached coasts with jagged reefs. The air is heavy with the tang of brine, and every dawn the deck creaks as the ship heaves gently on the waves. You rise before sunrise, stepping onto the deck to watch the horizon ignite in fiery crimson, the sea stretching inward like molten metal. The crew murmurs prayers to the wind, hoping to avoid the reefs off Aden. One morning you spot a slim crescent of land rising from the mist ahead. Aden's port, a bustling hub where caravans converge, awaits your arrival. Fishermen ply nets in shallow coves. Traders from India and Arabia wander barefoot across sandy streets strewn with spices. The aroma is rich, dry ginger, pungent turmeric, and fiery black pepper blending into a single tapestry of fragrance. You step ashore following traders who move laden with sacks of pepper. They navigate narrow alleys, their footsteps muffled by the soft sand. Stray kittens dart at your ankles, purring, desperate for scraps. Camels lie in the shade, their great humps rising and falling as they ruminate quietly. A merchant calls out to you an invitation to trade to barter. His stall overflows with saffron threads, cinnamon bark, cardamom pods, delicate as seeds. His eyes are sharp, measuring your pouches, your coins. Behind him, slavers stand their hands, rough barter cloths, filled with exotic cloth. You avert your eyes, remembering whispered tales of hapless pilgrims sold into bondage. Once you pay passage with spices, one misstep could mean slavery. You press onward, determined to find the Tao, headed for the Horn of Africa. On the way, you navigate chaos. Ottoman archers arguing with Venetian sailors. Jewish traders haggling with Arab moneylenders, all beneath the blazing sun. You secure passage northward, paying with half your pepper and a handful of gold coins, saved from years of scrimping and selling work. The Tao sets off again, slipping past Aiden's cliffs and into open seas. Nights grow darker, the only illumination the faint glow of stars overhead and the flickering kerosene lamp you carry. Each day the Tao's belly fills with trade goods. Cloves bound in banana leaves, nutmeg sealed in clay jars, cinnamon tied into bundles. The salt air corrodes wood and iron alike. The men sing an unsteady song to ward off longing to feel far from home, yet necessary to press onward. One evening as the Tao approaches the Somali coast, you stand clutching your empty pouch, nearly hollow after surrendering half your pepper in Aden. The Tao docks at a small port. Traders here speak a language you do not recognize. They point you toward canoes waiting offshore to ferry goods to larger ships anchored in deeper water. You lower your chest now, light as a feather, into a woven basket, and watch as a young boy with dark skin guides it into a canoe. The boy's eyes are solemn. He knows the value of this cargo. You climb aboard the canoe, which bumps you through gentle waves to the larger Tao, black-flagged with foreign symbols. You steady yourself, heart-pounding, as the sailor tosses your chest over the side. It lands with a splash. You lean over, watching the chest bob, tethered by a thin rope as though it floats between worlds, between safe harbor and perilous ocean. On board this new vessel you find other traders from distant lands. Persians, Ethiopians, Gujaratis, each cradling crates of spices, gemstones, rays of hope. They share stories of dangers ahead, storms around Cape Guardafui that swirl like no man's whirlpool storms that swallow entire fleets. They counsel each other in quiet voices, eyes narrowed in suspicion, aware that tomorrow's calm may dissolve into chaos. As the Tao rounds the Horn, waves swell taller than masts. The crew braces themselves. You cling to a railing, feeling each fiber of the ship moan beneath your weight. The sea churns into white foam. The wind shrieks like a savage beast. You taste salt thick as tears on your tongue. The ship groans dangerously. Planks creaking, this vessel has survived many voyages, but not all will survive this unpredictable swath of ocean. Hours later, battered but whole, the Tao emerges into the deep waters of the Indian Ocean. The fury of the Horn recedes. The sea calms to a gentle swell, glowing under a cloudless sky. You close your eyes, exhaling in relief. The smell of spices, cardamom, nutmeg, cinnamon drifts around you as the hold is lowered. There, the boy's basket emerges, chest glinting wet and closely bound. He hauls it up, hands locked tight around the rope, and places it at your feet. You cradle the chest like a saved life. Within lie remnants of pepper, dark spheres whose significance has grown immeasurably. You trace each grain with numb fingertips. Each one has survived storms, bandits, scurvy, and sunburn. Every grain carries stories of peril, cunning, and unrelenting hope. Hours later, the Tao sails north along the African coast, hugging the shoreline near modern-day Kenya. Fishermen guide the Tao through shoals using slender outriggers. They wave cheerfully, offering fresh fruit, bananas, and coconuts to maintain goodwill. You accept a banana, gratefully peeling it slowly, tasting its sweet richness, and savoring this gift of nature. Yet the Tao carries more than spices. It also carries rumors. Whispers drift among traders. At Malindi, merchants pay a king's ransom for a single chest of nutmeg. The sultans of Kilwa demand tribute in clove pods. Slavers lurk in hidden coves. Any lone trader who dares to step ashore risks enslavement. You grow uneasy. You remember the stories of traders who disappeared, dragged off by pirates under cover of night, sold in distant bazaars, never seen again. You wonder if the price of a few threads of saffron is worth a lifetime of chains and captivity. As the dhow approaches Malindi, you see a shoreline dotted with tall palm trees and stone minarets rising above thatched huts. Traders cluster along the beach, wading into shallow water, guiding vessels ashore. You disembark, wading through warm shallows until your feet sink into coarse sand. The sun is merciless. Sweat drips down your back as porters clamor for spices. You approach a bustling bazaar, vendors calling out in Swahili Arabic and pieces of broken Italian. Stalls overflow with treasures, piles of frankincense, jars of dried hibiscus, sacks of Zanzibar pepper. Wares from China and India lie next to African ivory and gold beads. The sheer spectacle dazzles you, colors, scents, languages swirling in joyful chaos. Yet behind every stall lies an unspoken price. The local king, a man robed in red silk, sits on a slightly elevated dais. He surveys the crowd with calm authority. At his side, armed guards stand, tall bamboo spears in hand. Their eyes flick over you and other merchants with bored indifference. You realize the king's favor is the final toll. You pay gold coins, your pepper is weighed carefully, then measured into heavy brass scales. The price is steep, nearly half the contents of your chest. You bow deeply as the king holds an ivory wrist rest, sliding rings of amber across his fingers, counting your coins with a slow grace that belies his power. You taste subtle panic. Each coin you hand over might have bought a bushel of grain back home. Yet here pepper and saffron command a value beyond reason. Spices once reserved for nobility are now trafficked through your hands, shaping destinies on both sides of the world. With payment complete, you lift the diminished chest, lighter now, but still precious, and press your lips together. You look northward once more. The dhow awaits, invisible beyond the bright white wall of the port. You step toward it, each movement deliberate, savoring the salty breeze and the brief security of fresh land beneath your feet. Before you board, you pause. You look across the harbor where vessels from India, Arabia, and Persia mingle, each crew engaged in its own commerce, navigating the same perilous waters. You realize in this vast world, spices are the currency of power, desire, identity. With each grain sold, you are part of a tapestry that stretches from far-off islands to the tables of kings in Europe. And yet, as you climb the gangplank, you sense fragility beneath this promise. A single storm, a single pirate raid, a single miscalculation at sea could mean total loss. Each grain of pepper riding within this chest is a gamble against fate. Your hand lingers on the chest's latch. You press it closed, and a final haunting question drifts behind your thoughts. If the journey to obtain a single pinch of spice can cost a life, and if that spice can transform the fortunes of kings, what deeper truths lie hidden in these exotic treasures waiting to be uncovered? Number 13, Reflections. What medieval food teaches us today. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself at a quiet table in the present day, surrounded not by flickering candles and peeling plaster walls, but by the warm glow of soft kitchen lighting. The table beneath your fingertips is polished oak, its surface smooth from years of meals shared. The hum of a modern refrigerator fades in the background, accompanied by the faint scent of breakfast fresh fruit. Whole grain toast, and a steaming mug of coffee that steams gently in the early light. You lift the mug to your lips. The rich bouquet of roasted beans, the gentle bitterness combined with milk's creaminess. It is a small moment of sensory bliss. Your cereal bowl overflows with colorful berries and yogurt layers of sweet and tangy harmony. You scribble a to-do list on a paper pad: groceries, a doctor's appointment, the children's school schedule. You glance around, a soft rug underfoot, thick walls sealing out the chill, a bright window offering a view of green lawn and sunshine. In this moment, you think, there is so much at my fingertips. Food, warmth, comfort. How did we come to live in such abundance? Your mind drifts back, seeking answers from a world fractured by hunger, disease, and scarcity. You visualize once more the tables of medieval peasants, rough wood-chipped bowls, meager pottage and stale bread, the starvation etched into every wrinkle on their faces, the threat lurking in each bite, knowing every meal might carry unseen poison, spoilage, or disease. You recall the severe gloom of the famine years, when even tree bark and bitter acorns became sustenance choices that offered life at a cruel price. A question arises, gentle yet insistent. What truths lie buried beneath our modern abundance? Truths we might forget in our rush for convenience. You set down your coffee mug and pick up a slice of toast. You spread it carefully with butter, unsalted, creamy smooth. It melts instantly, sinking into the porous surface. The contrast between warmth and cool air tickles your senses. You taste it thoughtfully, the faint saltiness, the richness that coats your tongue. You are nourished, content. You do not fear poison or spoilage. Yet the thought lingers. This simple, safe slice of bread is a luxury undreamed of in medieval times. As you chew, you consider the journey of these grains. How many hands touch them? Fields plowed by tractors replaced oxen and plowshares. Seeds sown in spring, nurtured by irrigation and careful fertilization. Harvested by machines that separate chaff at lightning speeds. Dried milled in climate-controlled mills, packaged and shipped via refrigerated trucks to grocery shelves. You imagine every step, each offering protection against contamination, spoilage, and shortage. You swipe your fingers across your phone's screen, checking messages from friends across the country. They ask about lunch plans, sushi salads, perhaps a new Thai place where you can try crispy basil chicken. You ponder the choices: rice bowls, vegan tacos, quinoa salad, rotisserie chicken. The variety staggers you. You feel almost guilty for the casual ease of selecting between dozens of options when once any choice meant life or death. You rise from the table and cross the kitchen floor to the refrigerator. You swing open the door and sift through dozens of bottles and containers. Milk, cheese, eggs, butter, yogurt, dozens of condiments. You've barely scratched the surface leftovers, waiting to be reheated fresh produce ready for salads. The shelves glow with fluorescent reassurance of plenty. You pause, feeling the weight of that moment. This abundance is more than convenience. It is a testament to centuries of innovation, trade, and social change progress that has made starvation rare in your corner of the world. Whoa. But as your eyes drift back to the calendar on the fridge, you notice highlighted reminders. Feed homeless client and donate to food bank. You recall news items about rising hunger food deserts in urban neighborhoods where fresh produce is scarce. Families living paycheck to paycheck, missing meals to make rent. You think of the farmers whose lands suffer from drought, whose harvests fail. You realize even today hunger persists. The medieval lessons remain relevant. Food insecurity stalks every era in every form. You close the fridge and move to a bookshelf. You pull down a volume on medieval history, flipping through pages that describe the Black Death, the Great Famine, and the spice routes that connected worlds. You read accounts of monks distributing bread to peasants, the charity of churches in times of hardship, and the scalding inequity of lavish feasts in castle great halls. You linger on passages about adulterated bread, chalk sawdust acorn meal mixed by desperate bakers. Each grain of flour a gamble. You think we take so much for granted: clean flour, USDA standards, clear labeling, expiration dates. Every once in a while we worry about E. coli or salmonella, but overall, you set the book aside, breathing a small sigh. Still another question arises. What of flavor? Those rare spices once reserved for the wealthy: pepper, cinnamon, saffron, now steep in grocery aisles, packaged affordably in tiny glass jars. You lift a jar of cinnamon and open it. The aroma is instantly familiar, warm, pungent, slightly sweet. You close your eyes, inhaling. The scent conjures apple pies at grandma's house, mugs of hot cocoa, the comfort of autumn. For medieval peasants, ingesting a single pinch of cinnamon might have cost lifetimes of labor, not simply coins, but risks of shipwreck, banditry, piracy, disease. You breathe in the warmth again, staggered by the gulf between then and now. Your reflection deepens while flavor now dances at your fingertips. Something of its mystique has faded. Seasons once dictated diets: root vegetables in winter, fresh fruits in summer, preserved jams and salted meats. Today supermarkets proffer strawberries in December, mangoes in February, asparagus in November, all flown or shipped from far-off lands. The convenience is extraordinary, yet the mysticism of rare flavors, power once worth dying for, has become ordinary. You close your eyes against the window's bright glare, remembering that first taste of pepper in Venice, cloves in Kilwa, saffron in a salt-rich liquid tincture. Those journeys were parts of life's grand tapestry, where a single flavor could transform a humble dish into divine magic. Now you sprinkle a pinch of pepper into your soup without a second thought. You sip your coffee again, feeling the burn of caffeine as it courses through your body. The world outside your window glimmers with possibility: cars idling at traffic lights, people strolling with reusable bags, children laughing with steamed buns in their hands. You think modern life often feels ordinary, but below its surface lies the sheen of countless innovations. Yet you cannot ignore the shadows. Landfills overflow with rotting produce. Millions of tons of food are wasted each year. You see grocery store bins heaped with bruised tomatoes, discarded because they aren't perfect. Restaurants toss uneaten slices of pizza into dumpsters as patrons leave tables. Meanwhile, outreach organizations scramble to rescue donations, redistribute them to those who go to bed hungry. You sense a haunting echo. We still live in a world where some feast while others starve. Only the forms of luxury and scarcity have changed. You pick up a small notebook on the counter, open to a blank page. You write a single line. What medieval food teaches us about gratitude, equity, and sustainability. You pause, pen hovering, then note a second line. We must remember the journey of every grain, every spice, every bite. Then you stop. A question rises beneath your words. In a world that has both conquered famine and still allows hunger to lurk, what responsibility does abundance impose upon us? With that question settled in your mind, you gather your things and step out into the warm morning. You pass a local coffee shop where farmers market produce is displayed out front. Apples, squash, honey, homegrown, local, sustainable. You think of farmers trying to make a living of the fragile balance between bounty and blight. A bullet point reminder on your phone lights up: volunteer at food drive. You nod. As you walk down the familiar sidewalks past painted storefronts and leafy trees, you recall one final image. A small medieval cottage, a mother kneeling by a smoky hearth ladling thin pottage into chipped bowls. Her children watch hungrily, half afraid that even this simple meal may be a one-time gift. The tension between need and provision, between hope and despair, hums within you. Your steps grow slower, deliberate, each footfall a reflection on privilege. You pass a billboard advertising all-you-can-eat buffet at a new chain restaurant. Images of sushi rolls, prime rib, and chocolate fountains vie for your attention. You feel a pang, an odd mixture of longing and guilt. You think, we live in a world where we can pick, choose, and discard massive amounts of food, yet somewhere shadows of medieval hunger still linger. Your journey ends at a community garden, a modest patch of green amid concrete and bustle. A volunteer tends tomato plants, gently tying vines to stakes. Others dig beds for spring planting. Children gather weeds, their laughter bright against the gentle hum of traffic. You smile, stepping forward to join them, wrenching tufts of grass, offering quiet thanks for the soil beneath. As your hands sink into the earth, dark, fertile, alive, you sense an ancient connection. The same soil that fed medieval peasants now feeds your urban oasis. Each seed you sow might sleep beneath the ground for months, only to sprout and offer sustenance. When the time is right, a small echo of the rhythms your ancestors knew. But you realize now you have choices: what to plant, how to harvest, how to share. You glance at the horizon, the sun rising higher, turning the sky amber. In that golden light, you answer your own question. Abundance demands responsibility. Each grain we save, each scrap we donate, each seed we plant carries forward lessons of history, lessons, reminding us that food is never just food, but life, dignity, and community. The wind rustles in the garden, a soft invitation to linger. Yet you know this reflection must continue beyond this moment into actions: reducing waste, sharing generously, advocating for fair access to nourishment. You close your eyes once more, breathing deeply, fresh garden air mingled with the faint scent of cinnamon from your spice rack at home. You remember the arduous spice journeys and famine-ridden fields of medieval times, but also the resilience of those who persisted. You understand that while technology has softened many hardships, the human heart still wrestles with hunger, inequality, and the quest for flavor, comfort, and dignity. As you open your eyes, the garden is bathed in morning light. You step forward, trowel in hand, ready to plant seeds with new purpose. And in that moment, one final question arises, soft, persistent, guiding, as vital as breath. What will you do today to ensure that no one goes hungry, and that the sweetness of every meal is shared by all? You open your eyes to the gentle glow of early morning sunlight filtering through kitchen curtains. A faint hum of modern life drifts through the open window. Birds chirping a distant lawnmower, the soft hiss of a passing car. You rise from your bed, moving quietly, so as not to wake your children already stirring in the next room. The mattress beneath you is soft with memory foam, a world away from the damp, straw-filled pallets of medieval peasants. In the kitchen, you set out breakfast, a bowl of oatmeal topped with fresh berries from the local farmer's market, a swirl of honey drizzled on top. You sprinkle a pinch of cinnamon, a spice that once required treacherous journeys halfway around the globe, and you pause to inhale its warm, fragrant aroma. It feels miraculous to simply open a cupboard and find dozens of spices at your disposal. You stir your bowl slowly, savoring how far things have come, even as the price of cinnamon remains a reminder of its storied past. As you sit at your table, you recall the villagers who risked life and limb to bring that same cinnamon to medieval Europe. You imagine them trudging through desert sands, clinging to battered caravans, evading bandits along narrow passes. Each shard of spice they carried was worth more than its weight in gold. In your modern home, a quarter teaspoon costs a few pennies, yet you taste its value in history. You spoon a bite of oatmeal into your mouth and let the flavors meld: the sweetness of honey, the tartness of berries, the gentle heat of cinnamon. You breathe deeply, feeling gratitude for this simple meal. A question surfaces. What responsibilities come with abundance when others still go hungry? You finish breakfast and place your empty bowl in the sink. You glance at a small stack of non-perishable food items: canned beans, bags of rice, jars of tomato sauce that you set aside each month to donate to a local food pantry. Today you plan to load your car and make that trip. Stepping outside, you walk through your neighborhood where tree-lined streets offer shade and comfort. You recognize neighbors watering their gardens, the soil damp and inviting to insect life. You think of medieval peasants who tilled land hardened by drought, or ravaged by floods, struggling to coax even barley from the ground. Your neighbors' flourishing tomatoes and peppers remind you that for many today, planting seeds remains an act of hope, bridging past and present. You slip behind the wheel of your car and set out for the food pantry, passing by strip malls and rows of houses. Along the way, you see a large billboard advertising a grocery store's weekend sale on organic produce: blueberries, kale, avocados. You recall medieval markets where fresh produce never lasted more than a single day, and exotic fruits arrived only after months at sea. Now we take for granted berries year-round, shipped overnight from distant farms. Pulling into the food pantry's parking lot, you notice a line of families waiting by the entrance, mothers clutching worn shopping bags, fathers holding toddlers on their hips, elderly couples leaning on canes. You wonder how many of these people ate too little yesterday, their children skipping meals to cover school expenses. Your donation feels small, but you know it matters. You collect crates from your trunk and carry them inside, hearing the grateful murmur of volunteers and the soft clink of canned goods stacked neatly on shelves. As you drop off items, rice, beans, pasta, peanut butter, you hear a volunteer recite food pantry rules. 1 box per family, no questions asked. You notice family photos taped to a wall, parents with children clutching bags of groceries, each smile a testament to relief. You realize that while medieval peasants struggled to divide a single loaf among many mouths, today's generosity can bring a box of staples to fill a family of 4 for days. Yet hunger remains a persistent shadow. Leaving the pantry, you drive home slowly, reflecting on the many lessons medieval food offers us today. How scarcity shapes behavior, how fear of famine drove entire populations to extremes, how the simple act of sharing scraps could mean life or death. These lessons resonate now as modern society grapples with food insecurity, waste, and unequal access. Back home, you walk into your backyard where a small raised bed garden awaits. You kneel on a soft foam cushion, damp soil clinging to your hands as you weed around baby lettuce and kale. The sun is warm on your back, and you listen to the gentle buzz of bees among blossoms. You feel connected to countless generations before hands that planted seeds by candlelight, by hearthfire, praying for rain and warmth. Now you water with a hose, tapping a faucet connected to a municipal grid, water so clean it never tastes sour or brackish. You carefully pinch off a few leaves of lettuce, crisp and vibrant, and pop one into your mouth. The taste is fresh, slightly sweet, a far cry from the flavorless gruel of medieval peasant tables. Yet you remember stories of small farms that fed communities during lean times, of church gardens that provided stew ingredients for the poor. Today, community gardens like this one sustain small pockets of hope in urban food deserts, reminders that collective effort can root out hunger just as medieval gardeners knew. You finish your weeding and sit on a wooden bench against the fence, holding a cool glass of spring water. You gaze beyond your property to the row of townhouses across the street, some with help wanted signs in front windows, reminders that economic stress still weighs heavily. You think of medieval laborers, day-wage earners, serfs bound to land, depicting a different but parallel struggle. For them, scarcity meant hunger. For some today, scarcity means housing insecurity and food banks. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves above, and you close your eyes, letting the moment wash over you. You feel a deep conviction settling in. It is not enough to remember medieval hunger as a distant spectacle. We must carry its lessons forward, grateful for abundance, mindful of waste, relentless in compassion. You rise, heading inside to prepare a simple lunch: grilled cheese with artisan sourdough and homemade tomato soup. You spread butter on 2 slices of bread, layer them with cheddar, and place them in a hot skillet. As the cheese melts and the bread turns golden, you recall the medieval baker adding filler to bread, a handful of acorn meal here, a pinch of chalk there to stretch limited supplies. Now your bread is pure flour, easy to digest, standardized for safety. But you know that for many around the globe, purity and safety aren't guaranteed. Your grilled cheese sandwich sizzles as you flip it, scenting the air with toasty warmth. You ladle the tomato soup into a bowl, stirring in fresh basil. You sit at your dining table alone, but mindful of your neighbors. Some will dine on leftovers from community potlucks, others on takeout containers, still others on cereal boxes served under fluorescent kitchen lights. Your thoughts drift to the concept of dignity. Medieval peasants bowed to church charity, sometimes humiliated. Today, people wait in pantry lines, feeling the same pangs of vulnerability. You take a slow bite of grilled cheese, savoring the molten cheese stretching between bread. Each bite is a celebration of everything that went into this meal. Dairy farms, wheat fields, laborers kneading dough, the mechanics of refrigeration, delivery trucks, and ultimately your skill in assembling it. You think every meal is an interconnected web of people and processes spanning continents and centuries. You glance out the window, seeing a neighbor pushing a stroller down the sidewalk. You wave, recalling that neighbor left a plate of cookies on your porch last winter when you were ill. You smile, imbued with warmth at that simple gesture, another form of medieval-style charity, albeit without the sack of grain or kitchen scrap. You rise from your chair and move toward the window, leaning on the sill. The day outside unfolds normally, joggers on the sidewalk, a dog walker pausing at a fire hydrant, children laughing on a nearby playground. Everything appears ordinary, comfortable, almost mundane. Yet you sense undercurrents: climate change threatening crop yields, supply chain disruptions making grocery shelves empty, overnight food inflation forcing families to make hard choices. You think of medieval peasants praying for rainfall or cursing a failed harvest, and you feel a surge of empathy. Though times have changed, the fragility of our sustenance endures. You lower yourself back into a chair, eyes focused on the soup's gentle ripples. We have come far, you reflect, but the core vulnerability remains. Food security is still precarious. Your phone buzzes a notification from a local community group about a drive to collect fresh produce for seniors unable to shop. You tap to view the details and feel a stirring. Just as medieval monks organized grain distributions during famine, we can rally neighbors to share fresh tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. You make a mental note to stop by the farmer's market this afternoon and pick up extra to donate. You finish your lunch and stand stretching arms above your head. You think of medieval surpluses festivals where nobles tossed excess delicacies into the streets, mocking the hunger beyond their walls. Today we have food waste dumpsters, way too full, leftovers languishing on plates. You vow, I will do my part to rethink waste and ensure that every meal counts. In the quiet kitchen you begin to wash dishes, bowl, spoon, plate, lid. Water runs hot and clear from the tap. The suds carry away crumbs of bread, remnants of soup. You rinse the dishes, stack them in the dishwasher rack, close the door, and press the start button. The hum of the machine begins, an astounding marvel compared to medieval times when washing meant scrubbing by hand in a freezing river, or conducting a weekly bath in a wooden tub heated by fire. You pause and touch the cool countertop, thinking even this simplicity is a luxury once inconceivable. Moments later, your phone rings. It's a local friend inviting you to volunteer at a community cooking event tonight, preparing meals for unhoused neighbors. You accept, feeling a blend of anticipation and determination. As you hang up, a final thought drifts through your mind. Medieval food taught our ancestors resilience and community. Today we honor that legacy by using our bounty responsibly, reaching out to those in need, and reminding ourselves that each meal is a gift worth cherishing. You draw in a slow breath, savoring the moment, the warmth of midday sun filtering through the window, the lingering taste of tomato and cheese, the hum of modern appliances. You step away from the kitchen, ready to carry these reflections into action, carrying forward a promise that each plate you share, each grain you save, and each neighbor you help draws a line of connection from medieval hardship to modern hope. And with that, you ask one last question, whispered gently in your heart as you step into the world. If the lessons of medieval food remind us how precious each morsel can be, then how will you ensure that no one today goes to bed with an empty plate? And so, dear listener, our journey through the long and winding tale of medieval food comes to a close. We've wandered through smoky hearths, trembling over bowls of thin pottage. We've stared in awe at lavish feasts where spices glowed like treasures. We've trudged through famine years, clutching bitter acorns and coughing over bruised bread. Together we've seen how each crumb carried weight and meaning for those who came before us, and how every plate still holds a lesson for our world today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for lingering with me through these stories of scarcity and abundance, of longing and resilience. If this slow, gentle exploration helped you appreciate the simple gift of a full belly, or stirred your curiosity about how food shapes our lives, please consider giving this video a like to let me know you enjoyed it. And if you'd like to come along on more whispered journeys through history, perhaps into other forgotten corners of our past, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. I promise to greet you with the same quiet storytelling and soothing voice each time. For now, I wish you a peaceful night. May your dreams be sprinkled with images of warm bread, fragrant spices, and the strength of those who persevered long ago. Sleep well, dear friend. Until we meet again for our next boring History for Sleep adventure, good night and sweet dreams.